Welcome back to another Sonic Speed Reading IDW compilation. This collects all of my coverage of the Misadventures after the Urban Warfare arc and finishing things up with the 75th issue and the end of the Sonic Riders storyline. Also want to apologize in advance for the inconsistent microphone quality. This is a collection of a lot of videos while I was moving around a whole lot and I was using different microphones where I could just to get videos out. So please have a little patience with me. I apologize. We're going to have a quick word from our sponsor, and then we are off to the races. Born Journey, and welcome back to another episode of Chef Nick. Now, as most of you know, I am obsessed with the color green. I also have a sweet tooth. Unfortunately, candy's real bad for you, and salads are for nerds. That's why I'm incredibly excited to talk about Groons. Now, if these were just green gummy bears, I'd already be sold. But they're not just green gummies, they're not just multivitamins, and it's not just a prebiotic. Gruns is all of these things and then some. And for a fraction of the price. This thing contains 60 different ingredients, and it's vegan, gluten-free, nut-free, dairy-free, with no artificial colors or flavors. Now, you hear all that stuff, and you might be thinking, man, that sounds like it's gonna be disgusting. Well, these guys are so confident in their product, they wanted me to eat this first in front of the camera. Let's take one of these guys out. That tastes really good. Like, I'm not kidding. These are really, really good. Oh my god. Alright, I gotta finish the ad. Whoops. Okay. The gummies aren't just for fun. They are a far more effective way to take in all the essential daily vitamins you need without absorbing unnecessary extra junk or washing out all those vitamins, which is very common with powder mixes and pills. The gummies are more bioavailable than those other forms, which simply means your body will absorb them and utilize those vitamins far more effectively. On top of that, they're methylated, which means they're going to be effective and safe for everyone. 30 to 40% of people have the MTHFR gene mutation, which makes non-methylated vitamins toxic. And let's be real, you probably don't know if you have that mutation. I certainly don't know for myself. You're always going to look forward to your daily pack, which contain 8 gummies per bag, because one gummy alone can't pack in all of those natural and clean ingredients, and they're carefully proportioned to make sure you get the exact amount your body needs without overdoing it. And if that sounds good to you, please use my link below to save yourself up to 52% off your order. It not only helps yourself out, but it helps out the channel at the same time. Welcome back to Sonic Speed Reading and another laid-back look at IDW Sonic. Just like after the Metal Virus, now that we've wrapped up the Imperial City arc, or I suppose it's also called the Urban Warfare arc, things calm down a little bit for the next couple issues, even though there is a bigger story that seems to be building up, but we're not going to be talking about that today. Instead, we're going to be focusing on Amy's trip to Angel Island, because we get an interaction that surprisingly we don't see too often, at least not in mainline Sonic, and that's Amy Rose hanging out with Knuckles. The stakes are low, but I do think any longtime fan is going to appreciate the conversations and little adventures these two get into. And knowing the shipping community, I'm sure this sparks some interest for some of you folks out there. And of course, you know how much I love Sonic 3 and Knuckles. I love any excuse to explore my favorite zones of this franchise. So, like I said, we're gonna focus only on that. There is a secondary story that's happening in issue 62, but for now we're only gonna focus on the 2 redheads. Yes, pink counts as red, shut up. This issue was written by Ian Flynn, art by Thomas Roethlisberger, colors by Leonardo Ito, I don't know if I'm saying that correctly, letters by Sean Lee with editors Riley Farmer and David Mariette. If you don't recall the end of the last story, Rouge swiped an ancient Echidna relic from Eggman's base. Amy spotted it, scolded the bat, and told her to hand it over so Amy herself could take it back to Knuckles. And that's where the story kicks off, as we see Amy arriving on the island in her now iconic buggy, and I love that they actually show it hovering around here. I wonder if that makes Sonic's transformed canon. And even on her own, I love that Amy is just full of love and compliments. She's just in awe of the beauty of the island as she hovers over it. And once again, they do show clues of different zones, the most prominent being Mushroom Hill, but we do see plenty of ruins some of which we'll be exploring shortly. Anyway, as Amy awkwardly lands on the island, she walks around the Master Emerald Shrine, taking note that Knuckles isn't around, so he must be on patrol. And for whatever it's worth, we can see from the soil around her that this is technically Angel Island zone. While Amy is admiring the view, and specifically a waterfall, the ground crumbles beneath her and she goes falling into Hydrocity, or Toilet Town zone. And you're gonna notice that through this issue, they cleverly take you through Sonic 3's opening zones in order. I also love how casually she's falling into this zone as well, still talking to herself. At this point, Amy is a well-seasoned adventurer on her own terms. And it is fun to take note of those differences after I just got done looking at Amy's anniversary comic. But yeah, back to Toilet Town. As Amy is falling, she's quickly swooped up by Knuckles. Noticing this is becoming a character trope for him as well, just curtly saying the character's name as he saves them. As they land, Amy explains her purpose for visiting the island, showing off the relic, and the stoic expression of Knuckles immediately changes. As most Sonic fans probably already know, he is a treasure hunter and he's very invested in the history of his island and more specifically of his people. He is the last Echidna after all. And I love this little panel of him touching heads with the relic. These are the last connections he has with his people, so obviously this is incredibly precious to him. And while Knuckles has always been friendly enough with Amy, you can tell that he is incredibly grateful and he warms up immediately and does something he doesn't normally do and asks if the pink hedgehog would like to join him while he returns it to its proper place. And this is what makes these little adventures so fun for me, because Amy is already asking the questions I would be asking and giving little context clues to how efficient Knuckles is on his island. She's surprised and asks if he already knows where the relic goes, and he responds saying he's pretty sure, pointing out the color and carving style of the stone, which again looks like a low poly model from Sonic Adventure. I love that. Anyway, he says that he has seen this style in both the Mystic Ruins and in Marble Garden, and once again, little details there, because one of those places is in Sonic Adventure and the other is in Sonic 3, both of which had ancient Echidna bits in them. Well, actually, just one specifically, but I will get to that. I love that Amy carefully looks over the statue, but has no idea what he's talking about, so just trusts his judgment and they carry on with their adventure. Shortly thereafter, Knuckles opens up a trap door, and I just want to point this out specifically. I don't know if this is any kind of a reference. It could just be me being nostalgic, but you might recall I covered the introduction to Knuckles in the Archie stories, and in that he had a very similar trapdoor. A lot of early Archie had very simple designs like that. I don't think they've had anything specifically like this from the games itself, and it looks a little out of place compared to the rest of the structural design of the island. So it could be a very quick little nod to early Archie. It could just be a simple coincidence, but it is one of those things that either way made me smile, and I just wanted to share that. And I also love this point here. This again is why I love Ian Flynn, especially when it comes to Knuckles, because he's noticing things that I noticed as well as a kid when playing the game. It's something I mentioned in my Sonic 3 and Knuckles videos. Amy points out that Knuckles never once made a detour their entire way through Hydrocity, Toilet Town, saying that he really knows his way around the island. And Knuckles says, yeah, he spent his whole life here and he's got a lot of free time on his hands. And again, another little detail, as Amy is picking herself up out of the hole, a cylinder actually lifts her up to the surface. One of the same spinning cylinders from Hydrocity. A lovely little detail. But as she's lifted into Marble Garden, the zone around them begins to shake, also like it does in Sonic 3. Nervously, Amy says that one was not her fault. Knuckles says no, the whole region is pretty unstable. Ruins are being buried and unearthed all the time. Love that little detail. And of course, he also points out that Eggman digging around is also a cause for all the commotion. He's not there currently, but everything he's done in Sonic 3 and Knuckles, and again in 2022's Free Comic Book Day, all that meddling has not helped things around here at all. Amy mentions that Jewel would probably be happy to send some folks from a restoration to help keep watch around the island, and Knuckles asks, who's Jewel? And fair enough, Knuckles has not interacted with a whole lot of the comic characters up to this point, and Knuckles once again gives a hard pass. I know this is a sticking point for Ian, so I do love that he he does ask this specific question anytime he gets a chance. He did the same with Blaze in last year's annual. And you see that frustration reflected in Amy asking, why doesn't anybody else protect the island in Knuckles' absence? And Knuckles says that you just have to keep an eye on more people on top of the island. Just makes things complicated. And Amy retorts that they'd be trustworthy, and Knuckles says he trusts her and like 5 others maximum. And I do love that Amy catches that casual little compliment. I think that's so unbelievably sweet. If you know the history of Knuckles and everything about him, that's a big deal for his character. And it also says a lot about Amy's character as well. So much love, so much empathy, you can't help but like her. I mean, she could warm the heart of Shadow, then certainly Knuckles was gonna warm up to her as well. But another thing I wanted to quickly point out, while there are no rings, which again is driving me insane, they do have the pulley lever from Sonic 3, and it is colored like a ring. If you played the original game, then you know that the pulley is blue. So, crazy conspiracy mode, just for a quick second, did they sneakily put a ring into IDW Sonic? Is this the first time we see a ring in this entire book? 62 issues in? I'm gonna take it as a win. This little tiny book is full of little details, I'm telling you. Anyway, sorry for yet another tangent. I told you, I love Angel Island. Amy follows up being happy about the compliment, but also asking, does that mean Knuckles trusted her to pick up the slack just as the resistance ended? If you've been reading the comic for a long time, then you know that Flynn quickly shifted around the roles. Got Knuckles out of that general role from Sonic Forces and got him back to Angel Island, and put Amy in his place to head up not the resistance, but the restoration, now that the war with Eggman was over. And she is being a little passive-aggressive about it. She is being a little snarky, but she is more than justified. He did leave her with a lot of work. And the stoic Echidna begins to sweat, feeling a bit nervous, saying, would it be a compliment or rude if I said yes? But Amy gives him a quick playful slug and a wink, telling him to relax. She was happy to help, she just wished she had a little more time to prep. And Knuckles gives her a genuine apology, and Amy says, hey, you saved me from falling to my doom, even though he really didn't. She was about to fall into a slide. But all the same, she says that they are even. And I love these two little panels because it did make me realize this is probably the first time Amy and Knuckles got to properly talk about this. They met back up incredibly briefly on Angel Island during the 3rd act of the Metal Virus, but obviously they didn't really have time to chat. And it's a comic like this where things are chill and the stakes are low, where they can properly address little things of this nature. And I love that attention to detail to their own stories. But yeah, moving on, they find themselves in front of a cave. While Amy is ready to just head on into the next adventure, Knuckles holds her back, saying that there's an active trap inside. He keeps these traps working to stop thieves, and obviously being ancient relics, he doesn't want to damage them either. So that does explain a little bit of why Marble Garden works the way it does. And again, sorry for yet another tangent, I want you to take note of the trap itself. Looking very similar to the ones that you do see in Marble Garden, but also at its base, we see a matching Echidna relic to the one the pair have, and an empty base that's obviously there for the missing relic. Before we go any further, we're going to do a little bit of Angel Island archaeology and ponder on a couple of things here. This is something I have wondered for a long time. I'd say since I played Sonic Adventure, and I don't know why I haven't brought it up on the channel before, but I always found it weird that there were traps with human faces on Angel Island, those being most prominently in Marble Garden Zone. Clearly, these Echidna relics, the same that we found in Sonic Adventure, work in tandem with these human face traps. So that makes me wonder, did cultures intertwine at some point? That's not entirely impossible. Remember that the Chows and Chaos are now, after Sonic Frontiers, confirmed to be a separate culture to the Echidnas, which we never had any explanation as to why such radically differently looking critters ever interacted. Maybe something similar happened here. Maybe there were two warring cultures, maybe some tribes found peace at some point, maybe the Echidnas weren't always a warring culture. I think I read that somewhere at some point. But there is a lot to pick apart there in just that single panel, and I absolutely love that because it's pulling from the entire history of the series and clearly Flynn has had a lot of fun working with Sonic Team in terms of unearthing these questions and bringing new answers to light. That's a lot of fun. And yes, that's mostly why I wanted to talk about this comic separately from everything else. I'm sorry it's not that great of a summary, but it got my geek juices flowing. And it's only further confirmed that these work in tandem with each other, because after Amy and Knuckles have a bit of a back and forth figuring out how to best handle the trap, Amy uses her Pico Hammer to ward off the Face's onslaught of arrows, while Knuckles closes the gap and returns the relic to its proper resting place. And while the two fist bump, Amy says that it looks like the Face was just cranky about its missing relic. Once again, I think this was all meant to work together. But just then, the ground once again crumbles beneath the two. Amy just looks irritated while Knuckles smirks as they fall. And the two friends grab each other's hands while Knuckles glides them to safety while Amy wards away oncoming rocks, saying that the relics should be extra safe now that they're lacking a floor. And then asks Knuckles if he grew up like this in this dangerous environment. Knuckles says that it made him who he is today. And Amy, grabbing his mitt, says that if he ever needs a break, he's always welcome at Restoration HQ. And Knuckles, who you'd normally expect to just give a flat no, says that he does know he's welcome, and he'll think about it. And that clearly caught him off guard. He's still not entirely used to this warmth and love from his friends. You gotta love Amy. Of course, she uses this little wiggle room in his answer to just start playing up HQ hardcore, saying that Jewel has everything running like clockwork, and that he'd love the initiative that Lanolin has started, to which Knuckles says, who? Again, love that little detail there, pointing out just how many characters Knuckles has not interacted with since IDW started. And the comic does use that point to jump over to Lanolin, but again, that is for another story arc. But as you can see from the runtime, even with this tiny story between Amy and Knuckles, I had a lot to talk about. But I won't keep you guys for too much longer. I hope you had as much fun on this little journey as I did. Yeah, the stakes aren't always as high as they could be, and as I've said before, I have felt the lull in a lot of months, but I suppose this hits a few of my own personal interests in the Sonic franchise. Made no secret to how much I love Sonic 3 and Knuckles, and while I don't mention it as often, my second favorite game in the series is Sonic Adventure, and the connection between those two cannot be understated. This little comic not only follows up on little bits of continuity within IDW's own story, but also gives little pieces for fans to chew on in terms of the overall lore for Angel Island, arguably the most interesting spot in the world of Sonic the Hedgehog to this day. There's a lot of mysteries still worth unearthing, and while they do answer some things here and there and some bigger questions in the recent release of Sonic Frontiers, I do love that the comic, in the last couple times we visited Angel Island, does go out of its way to mention just how big this landscape is, and just how many more mysteries are left to be found. And on the interpersonal level between Knuckles and Amy, it is weird just how little we've seen some of these characters interact, even after all of this time. I did say, and this was a little bit of a critique in terms of the 900th issue, bringing back the same unchanging characters over and over again, and just mixing up which ones interact, is going to lose its luster after a while. A lot of the heftier moments emotionally in this book, and in Archie, at least the later years, had to heavily rely on the characters that came from the comics, because they are allowed to change, they are allowed to grow, they are allowed to have a bit more trauma in their past worth exploring, they're allowed to be characters, while a lot of the Sonic cast these days have to be safe and consistent mascots. Mascots that I love, make no mistake about it. And this particular critique is one I have mentioned before, but it is a hard truth when you're dealing with corporate mascots, any corporate mascots. That's why I can never be fussed with any big changes in Spider-Man or Batman or anything like that, because no matter what they retcon, somebody else will retcon it again, and no matter how drastic of a change they make here or there, they will always revert to their default, iconic, sellable state. And that's no different with Sonic the Hedgehog, even if there are some slight changes here and there throughout the years that you may not be happy with. I certainly don't have everything I want out of the franchise, but that's okay, and we're still not at the point where these interactions have grown tired. I really love seeing Amy and Knuckles interact the way they did, and these subtle little hints in the way they speak to each other that really show the depths elements to these corporate mascots. And this is what I love about Flynn's writing. He's taken these simple little elements from canon games and have expanded upon them and evolved them. And while yes, I do get a little bit tired of grapes and tarot cards and little details that they just picked up out of manuals, I am still glad that they are paying attention to those details. Welcome back to Sonic Speed Reading. Today we're going to be following up on Amy's adventure to Angel Island, where she teamed up with the Guardian to put an ancient relic back in its resting place. But as it turns out, we weren't quite done with those little statues, as we see Knuckles team up with a crew that gives me and a lot of other older fans a great hit of nostalgia. And while all that's happening, we're going to be checking in on Cream the Rabbit as she prepares dinner. I promise it's more interesting than it sounds. The issues we're going to be looking at today are issues 65 and 66. The Knuckles story, known as Relic Robbing Rumble, is written by Ian Flynn with pencils by Mauro Fonseca, inks by Rick Mack, colors by Reggie Graham, and Dinner at Cream's is written by Evan Stanley with art by Adam Bryce Thomas and colors by Valentina Pinto. Letters by Sean Lee with an editor credit for David Mariette and production credit for Joanna Natalie. Now this story follows up on a couple of little plot threads and mixes in with some other stories that are sure to pay off shortly before this canon goes on a brief hiatus, but for today we're just going to be focusing on these two stories, and things kick off real quick as we're back on Angel Island in the Marble Zone, where Knuckles confronts the Babylon Rogues as they attempt to steal the two relics. Jet and Wave make off with the statues as they sick Storm after Knuckles. The Echidna gets in a good hit, but unfortunately Storm grabs him by the leg and slams him into a wall, giving the birds enough time to make their escape. And unfortunately, even a ticked off Knuckles can't catch up to their extreme gears. And that leads us to the Chaotix Detective Agency, where we see the Echidna hiring the group to help him track down the Babylon Rogues. And this, of course, is the major appeal of this particular story. A lot of us older fans were introduced to a lot of these characters in Knuckles Chaotix, and we haven't really seen the Echidna team up with these guys too often since, at least outside of Archie Comics, but that's a story for another time. Anyway, the Echidna asks how the Rogues even knew about the relics, and Vector responds saying that they're professional thieves and they specialize in ancient artifacts, and Angel Island unfortunately is a great target for that. Espio suggests that maybe they thought the relics would be less guarded than others, or maybe they're going for something specific for a buyer. As all that's happening, Charmy picks up the phone and says that he is going to call Amy. Since she's the one that helped bring back the relic, he's sure that Amy would also want to help bring it back. But in a panic, Knuckles slams the phone down, breaking it, saying they can't tell Amy. Maintaining his pride is far too important. Espio calls him out on it, but Knuckles doesn't deny it. It's a cute little scene. And Vector is ready to just get a roll on with this investigation, as he says they never turn down work that pays, and he wants to close this case in record time, as the comic focuses up on his schedule showing Dinner at Vanilla's. It's adorable. The comic then shifts his focus over to Egg Base Delta, where we see Knuckles and the Chaotix wrecking shop, trying to get the attention of Dr. Eggman. And quickly, they get exactly that, asking what they're even doing. They've already ruined his recent plans. He hasn't had the time to start up a new scheme. Knuckles furiously blames him for the stolen relics, but Eggman has no idea what he's talking about, and Knuckles responds that Vector figured out that Eggy hired the Babylon Rogues to steal them back. And I enjoy this little tidbit here. This shows you how Eggman perceives characters we don't normally see him interact with. His monitor flies over to Vector saying, "Out of all these buffoons, I thought you were supposed to be the smart one." Vector nervously pulls at his chain, saying, "Look, we're on a tight deadline, and usually Eggy's at fault." And Eggman just says with an exasperated sigh that he takes whatever he wants whenever he wants. He doesn't keep track of everything he grabs during his conquests. He has his robots catalog everything. Knuckles says that the relic was found in the Imperial City and that he knows that Eggman took it. Eggman doesn't deny it, but he asks why would he bother to hire the Babylon Rogues when he could just send robots. He asks if the relic had any special value, any arcane or mystic powers, and Knuckles, looking a little embarrassed, says it had historic and sentimental value. And the annoyed Eggman just says he doesn't know or care about it, now just get out. I love how embarrassed all of them look, with Knuckles saying, "We made a mistake, at least I'm strong enough to admit it." It's a very cute scene and kind of sets the tone for the rest of the story here. This is almost just a game to these characters. I love that Eggman can go off and attempt to take over the world, but the moment the heroes come in and wreck his stuff unexpectedly, immediately he takes offense to it. The dude is always up to nasty stuff. The world is better off without his robots, but the heroes just leave embarrassed. We then find them back in Seaside City enjoying some dessert, or at least Knuckles is, some cute little grape flavored thing. We see some interesting background characters there. One of them kind of looks like Styx. I'm sure this is another anime reference I'm not getting. I know they put those in all the time. Anyway, Vector and Knuckles begin to discuss other suspects, and Vector suggests Clutch, who Knuckles doesn't know. Once again, going to show how little we've actually seen the Echidna in this series. And not to be too spoilery here, but Clutch will be important for the overall bigger story. But just then we have Charmy interrupting the pair, making a sloppy landing and sending their table flying. Love the little visual of Vector sipping an espresso out of that little cup. Very cute. Espio then appears out of nowhere, scaring the crap out of Vector. Just a bunch of cute interactions all around. Espio says that they've learned where the Babylon Rogues will be making their handoff of the goods. And Charmy, looking very proud of himself, says that he heard some sketchy looking guys gossiping and pointed out to Espio, to which the lizard responds saying, yeah, it was all very convenient. But as Knuckles points out, it's the only lead they have, so he has to follow it. Soon we find ourselves in front of some docks with the Babylon Rogues, where we see Wave and Jet bickering with one another, while Storm is busy playing with the two relics, naming them Stevie and Nigel, which is precious and is now officially their names forever. Jet snaps at him, telling him not to play with the relics, and when Wave looks at him, asking if he's showing a bit of cultural sensitivity, giving him a chance to show a good side of him for a change, he just says he doesn't want them busted and devalued before he can sell them off. But if they were Babylonian, that'd be a different story. He wouldn't bust up anything from his ancestors' history. The view changes to an alley where we see Knuckles, Espio, Vector, and Charmy all waiting in the dark, preparing to attack the birds. And that is where part 1 ends. From here, the comic moves over to the kitchen of Vanilla and Cream. And I know that's quite the shift. And normally I would just cover one story at a time and not mix them up, but I promise they merge in together nicely, so we might as well do them in the order the comic gives us. Anyway, we see the little family, including Cream, Vanilla, Gemerald, and the two chows, Cheese and Chocolate, all preparing for a dinner party. Chocolate is making some trouble eating everything he can get his little mitts on. Meanwhile, Vanilla notices that they're all out of butter. She's not able to finish their sauce without said butter, so she is off to the store to grab some more. Gemerald asks if he can go and take care of this mission for them, but Vanilla's not worried about it. She's going to head off to the store herself, should only take a minute, and she tells Cream to keep an eye on the stove and not to forget about the roast. Then, like a Disney princess, she carries on down the road with some birds flying around her. But in the bushes, we see Rough and Tumble. Apparently, they've been waiting for Vanilla to leave her little cottage so they can go and rob it. They've hit some tough times as of recently, and yeah, if we go back to anything we've seen prior to this point in the story, every single time they show up, they get their asses handed to them. So now they've come to this, breaking and entering. Meanwhile, in the kitchen, we see Cream carefully looking over everything on the stove, and I'm honestly quite surprised they left a little girl with so many things on fire, but whatever. She's determined to make sure everything goes perfectly. And as Gemerald points out, perfection is an unrealistic goal, but he has observed her performance through many adventures, and she has already proven worthy of this responsibility. Cream appreciates that little boost in confidence and asks the robot to set the dining room table, but as he enters it, he comes across the two skunks. And of course, a fight immediately breaks out. Cream hears a noise in the other room and is just about to check on what's happening, but doesn't want anything to burn, so she sends Chocolate out to check instead. The little chow comes across the fight between the robot and the two skunks and rushes back into the kitchen in a panic. But the skunks hear all the commotion and they head over to the kitchen, where they come across Cream with intent to take her hostage. But in the commotion, dishes begin to spill and a fire bursts on the oven top. And that is where part 1 ends for this story. Let's move on to issue 66 and back to Knuckles and the Chaotix. Our heroes leap out from the alleyway to take on the Babylon Rogues a second time. In a panic, Jet tells his team to scatter, split up the loot, and have Storm hold them off. The giant bird and Knuckles continue their fight they left off on Angel Island, while Charmy immediately grabs the relic from Jet. But after Jet says that he won't let that brat steal from him, Charmy immediately returns it because stealing is bad. But Espio latches on to the bottom half of Jet's extreme gear, and the two go spinning out into the water. Meanwhile, Wave, who is closer to the water, is followed closely behind by Vector, and it's rare we see him act like an actual crocodile. It's cool seeing him move so quickly through the water water and then bite onto her extreme gear. As they go flying off, we turn our attention back to Storm and Knuckles as they continue their fight. And it looks like Storm once again has the upper hand here, saying that in the air or on the ground it doesn't matter, Knuckles can't beat him. So the echidna responds with a smirk, then how about in the water? And then launches towards the dock below, sending them both into the water, taking out the giant bird. And with that, Knuckles tells the Chaotix to wrap it up, and it just reminds me of the Archie days and just warms my heart. And we see Wave surrenders so Vector doesn't do any more damage to her board, and a waterlogged Jet hands over his relic to Charmy, who politely asks for it this time. And with that, the Babylon rogues are defeated. Once everyone's back on land, Vector asks who hired them to steal the relics. And when Jet refuses to give them answers, Vector threatens to steal their boards. Jet just tells them that the guy never used a name, just called and then paid them, and that's all there is to it. But before they can continue on pressing questions, Knuckles says he's done with it. He got his relics back, and that's all he cares about. Storm threatens another fight, and Knuckles is about to trade fists with him one more time, but the two groups are quite done with all the shenanigans for the day. So yeah, while they should turn in the rogues to some sort of authorities, Knuckles got what he wanted, so they part ways. And Vector asks Knuckles if he is going to pay them for all their work, and once again, the poor Chaotix get a little shafted, as Knuckles doesn't really have anything in the way of money, at least I don't think so. I doubt he has anything in terms of currency up on the island, but he says that a lot of fruits are in season and he can forage in Mushroom Hill, so they can at least be fed. But that reminds Vector that it's dinner time, so he shoves off the two relics, Stevie and Nigel, to Knuckles, and they head off to Vanilla's. Knuckles looks on after them, calling them weirdos, but good guys, then asks how he's going to get home. We turn our attention back to the Babylon rogues, where Jet is calling their contact. He had obviously lied to the Chaotix. And I'll give this much to Jet, he does not beat around the bush. He immediately says that they got pinched by the Chaotix, they lost the relics and the fight, so he's not able to do the handoff. But they'll just grab it one more time once the dumb Guardian puts them back in their place, but his contact says it won't be necessary. As it turns out, this was all part of a plan to ensure that certain parties were preoccupied while he conducted business. And as far as the contact is concerned, his needs have been met. Jet is furious, thinking he's been used, but his contact tells the bird that he will be fairly compensated for his services. And the phone call ends, revealing to us that the contact was Clutch. And it turns out he is in the middle of a meeting with Jewel the Beetle. Yeah, I guess it makes sense. Not all of the heroes know who Clutch is. And we end our story with Jewel and Clutch shaking hands, with the opossum saying, as per tonight's agreement, Clean Sweep Incorporated will give her their undivided attention. Now, we have seen him stick his creepy little fingers in other little plots here and there, and we will discuss them next time around. But for now, let's finish up over at Cream and Vanilla's house, where, if you'll recall, a fire just went off in the middle of the ensuing chaos. But Cream is determined, covering up the different dishes and turning off the ovens. But she's still all teary-eyed, knowing that she has ruined a couple of dishes. And the skunks aren't done causing chaos as they take the currently prepared dishes and start using them as weapons. A food fight breaks out until a little timer sets off. Yes, even with everything else destroyed, Cream is not about to forget the roast, so she takes it out of the oven, and it turns out it's perfect until a skunk steps on it. And that just completely halts all the action. Everyone just pauses in shock, and then Cream breaks down in tears. And you can tell the skunks actually feel a bit bad about this. The fights stop completely, and General does his best to console the sad Cream. And just then, Vanilla returns to her house and looks upon the chaos, and a dark aura emanates from the Mama Bunny. Vanilla says, "Cream dear, I seem to have missed a few things." And the crying baby bunny points to the two skunks, who look utterly terrified. And Vanilla, barely holding back an unbridled motherly fury, asks the two skunks if it's okay to break into other people's homes, to ruin other people's hard work, and to attack children. They fall to their knees, begging for forgiveness. And just as Vanilla is about to unleash some sort of fury, the Chaotix arrive as well, looking on in shock and horror at the two skunks, telling Vanilla to stand back as they are trouble, but she says it's quite alright. She thinks they've learned their lesson, and they say no more crime from them today, honest. So the Chaotix relax. They've already had a full day of busting baddies, and then Vanilla turns her attention towards her upset daughter, feeling disappointed that she couldn't follow any of the instructions her mom left for her. But Vanilla tells her that she was very brave and she did her best, and that's always worth being proud of. But with dinner ruined, they have to come up with a second idea for food. So they just order some Chinese, with Vanilla, Cream, the two Chow, Gemerald, the Chaotix, and even the two skunks all around the dinner table. With Vanilla saying it's not perfect, but sometimes that's better. I love that she's feeding Vector a little pot sticker. Oh, it's precious. So yeah, there you go. Not very high stakes in either story. This was all very, very cute, but it was certainly nice to spend some more time with all of these other characters and without Sonic in sight whatsoever. If I remember correctly, it used to be a rule that Sonic always had to appear on a cover for the Archie series, but he's not on the cover for 65 or 66, and he doesn't appear once. Man, it was cute to see Vector crushing on Vanilla some more, and the home life of the rabbits and the robots always really cute. And at least for me, it was just nice to see Knuckles with the Chaotix. They were always a crew to me growing up, thanks to the game and thanks to the Archie series, where they were treated as Knuckles freedom fighters for Angel Island. And yeah, we're still missing Mighty, and I hope they change that sooner rather than later, but even for a brief team up, this warmed my heart. This was really nice to see. And I can tell that these guys also miss that combined crew as well. We now have the Tails 2 fully confirming that Knuckles Chaotix is a part of the main game canon, and we even saw a hint at Classic Vector in that Amy special a couple months ago. I'm hoping this is hinting at indications of the return of the Classic Chaotix. Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if they did make their appearance in Knuckles' anniversary special showing up in 2024. These little hints are either indicating that is on the cards for the future, or they're really trying to push for that from Sonic Team, and hopefully they'll be allowed to play with those characters a little more often. We did recently see Mighty again, and hey, I would love to see the Classic Chaotix interpreted in this universe. But for now, if this is all we have, I'm pretty happy with it. This was a fun little story, or set of stories, and with Clutch it looks like they're building to something a bit bigger. But we'll touch more on that next time. Welcome back to Sonic Speed Reading. Now, while there have been a lot of lighter one-off adventures as of late in the IDW Sonic series, they have been sprinkling hints of a larger plot coming together. And all of it is forming around Clutch, a villain we've only seen a couple of times in the series up until now. And while he hasn't done a whole lot so far, he has left an intimidating impression, even though he's largely gone under the radar, but that's very much intentional on his part. He's a shifty black market businessman, a scavenger, a swindler, and a con man, and he's gearing up to make some sort of big move. We pick up our story by going back to the bits we skipped in issue 62. We find ourselves at Clean Sweep Incorporated. Inside, we see Clutch being approached by one of his employees, but said employee is immediately called out and revealed to actually be Mimic. Yet another creepy black skull-arid villain born from the IDW comic. Seems that the octopus is responding to an invitation from Clutch himself, and we are filled into the purpose of Clean Sweep. Think of it as Sonic's version of damage control for any of you Marvel fans out there. The basic idea is they come in and clear up after Eggman battles, since the good doctor is known for leaving a giant mess behind. He never picks up after his broken toys. On its face, this is providing a much needed service to the world, but this is simply a front for Clutch to amass Eggman weapons and tech, and soon he hopes to stockpile the largest arsenal this world has ever seen. Problem is, the Restoration has become ridiculously efficient with taking care of just about everything society might need in terms of getting people back up and running after the constant barrage of Eggman attacks. And that obviously includes cleanup. So Clutch needs them out of the picture. And it wouldn't hurt to get revenge on the heroes who toppled his previous empire along the way. And that is where Mimic comes in, since he can transform into any other form he wants. Or, well, there are limitations, we'll get to it in just a second. This ability will allow him to slip in undetected behind enemy lines and take down the Restoration from the inside. And obviously I cannot leave this page without pointing out the perfect Chaos Cola. I think it's adorable. This is the closest this series is going to get to alcohol, and obviously the references on top of references just make this super clever. Maybe someday they'll do a Sonic mixology book to go alongside the cookbook, and we can all get crunk on Chaos Cola. Anyway, if you are familiar with the character of Mimic, you know he's a very selfish and self-reliant, creepy little critter. He's been keeping a low profile ever since he got out of jail, if you recall when we covered Bad Guys, or maybe you read it yourself. You probably should read it. Yeah, go read it if you haven't read it yet. But Clutch points out to Mimic that he has done his research, and he is well aware that the octopus was once a part of the Diamond Cutter team, the one he betrayed, which caused all that drama with Whisper. And Mimic is still out for revenge against the wolf, and her, not officially said, but we all know better, girlfriend, Tangle. And as it turns out, both the girls have formed a new team within the Restoration, called the Diamond Cutters. This hits a very particular nerve within Mimic, and that is what he needs to agree to go along with Clutch's plan. Later on, we find ourselves at Restoration HQ with the current Diamond Cutters, which consist of Tangle, Whisper, and Lanolin. So far, they've only had one mission. And yes, while it was technically a success, a lot could have gone wrong, and nearly did. Lanolin is still new to leading a team, and she has very interesting personalities to try to wrangle in. Thankfully, Whisper does have experience with this kind of stuff. As we know, she was a part of the original Diamond Cutters. So Lanolin asks her for advice, and Whisper says that they'd organize themselves by simply volunteering. There wasn't actually a set structure on how to bring in new members. They all just found one another in a time of war. It didn't become formal until they all were already together and already kind of a cohesive unit. Tangle does point out that they're already a pretty decent trio, but obviously Lanolin has her concerns and would like to have some options for whatever kind of crisis may come their way. And quite conveniently, somebody knocks on the door, and we are introduced to Duo the cat, who is here to volunteer to become a part of the Diamond Cutters. And he says all the right things to the girls, everything they are looking for in a new member that resonates with them personally. So for Lanolin, he says that he wants to make a difference and help his community, but he also wants more adventure in his life, which resonates with Tangle, but finishes up by saying that he understands that this is dangerous work that he will take seriously, and he hopes he can be somebody they can rely on, which, knowing the history of Whisper as well as he does, obviously resonates with her. Tangle's immediately on board, but Lanolin does her best to keep things professional, treating this like a proper job interview, asking if he's got special skills or experience or anything like that. But Duo nervously points out some clear inexperience, having a hard time really bragging about what he's capable of. He says he can work his way around computers, he's fairly nimble, he can handle a Wispin well enough. That does leave Lanolin a bit concerned, but as Tangle points out, she wasn't exactly experienced prior to meeting up with Sonic, which wasn't that long ago. Whisper backs us up, saying that this would be a good time to train somebody up because there isn't a war going on right now. And that's all Lanolin really needs. They're going to start him off on a trial basis and see if they can train him up and see if he's a good fit for the team. And since Duo unfortunately doesn't have any living space nearby, he's going to shack up within Restoration HQ. Tangle excitedly shows him to his room, saying that the Restoration has plenty of space for folks who need it, very subtly pointing out just how efficient this place has become since Jewel took over as director. And also a lovely little note showing the priorities of this world. It's not just beating up robots and calling it a day. Tangle leaves Duo to get acclimated, and that's where we are shown that this cat is actually an octopus, which is no surprise to anybody. Even before this book was coming out, people had already assumed that this new mystery character was indeed Mimic. And yeah, obviously the comic itself made that no mystery. The scene was just showing you the perspective of the Diamond Cutters. It's no shock to the reader that Duo is actually a bad guy. What is interesting is the little details that Evan Stanley revealed about Duo. Something I wasn't aware of. Apparently, importantly, Mimic can only copy people he has personally come across himself, meaning that he is actually a recolor of someone he's familiar with. He's actually parading around as one of the previous diamond cutters. That is incredibly twisted. Now, you could be wondering, as I did myself, why Whisper wouldn't immediately recognize the face of a dead friend, but if Amy can confuse Sonic and Shadow, then who can blame her? And really, comparing the two designs side by side, there's enough difference there, obviously the major one being the coloring of the fur, that one would assume these are two separate critters. I mean, I certainly didn't immediately catch it. So that got me thinking, maybe Mimic is doing this because Duo looks different enough that he could pass on as a completely unique character. He also doesn't have to worry about coming across the real version because that guy's dead, and this would subconsciously make Whisper trust him that much more, and also kind of spit in the face of the memory of their fallen comrades right in front of Whisper all at once. And of course the name Duo is implying a dual identity, I know, but the point is there are a lot of layers to this disguise, and I think that's pretty cool. Maybe more of this stuff will be revealed as the story goes along. Maybe a lot of this just needs to be implied and can't really be told, and if that's the case, I simply love that that level of detail has been given to these characters. Like I keep saying, a lot of the cast is not allowed to change or really emote, at least not explore the vast spectrum of feelings one can have, not as extensively as the characters created for this comic. And I gotta admit, Mimic becomes more and more interesting the more he shows up. But let's not waste any more time to see when he shows back up, as that's in issue 63. We find ourselves in a workshop in Restoration HQ, where Belle is putting the finishing touches on Whisper's Wispin. We can see the busted Moto Bud, still haven't resolved that particular problem, and really it's just a cute little scene showing Whisper, Tangle, and Belle interact. And it is a very short interaction, just showing us that Whisper does get her weapon back, as it was busted in the fight against Surge. After that, Tangle and Whisper head on out because apparently Lanolin has them on a training schedule. But as they turn to leave, Whisper runs headfirst into Silver the Hedgehog. Poor guy's been a little bit zoned out of it. He's been dealing with a lot of anxiety. We haven't quite covered his backup stories in the annuals, but the point is he's here in the present, but he doesn't really have any reason to be here. Every other visit has been with purpose, and now he finds himself a little aimless. So the girls give him something to do. They invite him to join the Diamond Cutters in training. And if you recall, way early on in the series, Silver idolizes Whisper, so he is very excited at the opportunity to train alongside the Angel of the battlefield. And that leads us to Green Hill Zone, which apparently is still recovering from the Eggman War, at least parts of it are, as Lanolin has taken them to an area where the restoration hasn't restored, and it's going to give them a chance to really cut loose without having to worry too much about the surrounding environment. And since they have new recruits on hand, that being Duo and Silver, Lanolin feels this is a good time to work on coordinating moves and communication. As they head on down into the canyon to begin training, Duo, or actually Mimic, thinks to himself about Silver and how he can be a problem. Silver does have quite a lot of power after all. So he makes his play. He walks right up to the hedgehog and introduces himself, hoping to inflate the hedgehog's ego, talking about how he helped take down the Metal Overlord, solve the Metal Virus crisis, asking about those cool telekinetic powers he seems to have, and Silver can't help but show off, as he uses his powers to move a giant pile of boulders. And I don't think Duo is feigning how intimidated he actually is in front of the spectacle that is Silver the Hedgehog, who is quietly bragging that this is nothing, he just doesn't want to cause a whole lot of damage. Tangle cheers the hedgehog on, which catches the attention of Lanolin, who decides that these boulders can be put to use and asks Silver to bring them down to the training area. But while she's asking, Duo goes in for his sabotage, as he kicks the back of Silver's foot, causing the hedgehog to lose focus and send the boulders tumbling down. In a panic, Silver rushes to recover before the boulders crash around the girls, but unfortunately at the same time water begins to leak from the rock wall behind Duo and Silver, and a giant chopper badnik bursts out from behind the pair, and with it comes a giant wave of water, flooding the canyon below. Thankfully, these are very talented animal people, and Tangle swiftly rescues the other two girls and gets them out of danger. At least the first part of danger. They still have to contend with the falling boulders, which are quickly broken apart thanks to Lanolin's Wisp Bell, all taken care of while Whisper hovers the three of them to safety. Kind of a cool Sonic Heroes trio here. We turn our attention back to the chopper, which has Silver in its maw. Duo, in a panic, urges Silver to quickly tear this robot apart, but Silver says it's a lot harder when the object in question can fight back. But Mimic sees this as an opportunity, and that mask begins to slip as his sclera turns black, and that creepy stitch pattern appears over his mouth as it begins to smirk as Mimic abandons Silver, leaving him to his fate in the giant robot fish mouth. But before Silver can be crushed, the Diamond Cutters are here for the rescue, landing a shot on the side of the big fish. And now that it's stopped moving, that gives Silver all the help he needs to yank open the jaws and send the robot flying. Furiously, he points at Duo, claiming that he ditched the hedgehog. But Duo says that he was just calling for help, and Silver, understandably, asks why didn't he just say that? And if you wanted to see just how fierce the Silver fan base is, and how quick they are to turn on a character, then you should see how they reacted to these next two panels. As Lanolin comes in to defend Duo, saying there's no reason to point fingers, and she expected better control from Silver. With powers like his, he has to be extra careful. And that's just it, just a light scolding, but man, oh man, people were so quick to hate on Lanolin after that. The love for this goofy hedgehog is next level. We next find Silver sitting atop his little garden shed, looking really bummed out, but he's soon startled by the appearance of Whisper. He apologizes for being distracted. He can't stop thinking about what happened at Green Hill. Something just felt off about Duo, and Whisper confirms it. She saw everything. She saw the kick, she saw Duo abandon him, and Silver says that he could swear he saw Duo's eyes change color. And when Silver describes how they changed, Whisper knows who exactly they're dealing with. And that's where the story ends in issue 63. Now, to be upfront with you here, and I'm very sorry to disappoint some of you folks, there is another story that's happening alongside all of this in the same issue. One that follows Sonic and Blaze as they go on a rooftop run. It's quite adorable, and it's following Blaze and her journey in Sonic's world. There was a little panel showing Sonic and Blaze holding hands that made the fan base lose their minds for a week on Twitter. It was adorable. But there's really not much to report there. If you're a fan of these characters and a fan of them interacting, I say check it out. It is, like a lot of these stories in these last few months, more about exploring the dynamic between a couple of characters more than it is about trying to progress any kind of a plot. At least that's what I'm seeing on the surface. For more long-term reasoning, I'm sure they're trying to find reasons to explain why Blaze and Silver could remain constant in this present-day universe, as opposed to having to time travel or hop between dimensions all the time, anytime they wanted to play with these characters. But that's very much a wait-and-see kind of a situation. Whatever the case is, it's always great to see Silver, and it's always great to see Blaze. But I bring that up because that story will eventually cross paths with the one we are talking about today. And we get back to that in issue 64. I have to take a moment to just appreciate the living hell out of the cover. Yes, I know they're playing off a meme, but it is just the craziest thing to me to see Sonic the Hedgehog reference It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. And not only that, I get to see that with Mecha Sonic and Mecha Knuckles on the cover. What a time to be alive, you know what I mean? The comic kicks off with Whisper catching Silver up to speed with Mimic and his gimmick, explaining how they used to be teammates on the original Diamond Cutters. He betrayed the team, and clearly he must be back disguised as Duo to finish the job. And it turns out they've been stalking Duo at Restoration HQ all day. And I have to say, it's pretty obvious that you can see Silver in the brush, but I love that his hair just blends in with the ferns. It's just an adorable little touch. Good job. unfortunately, they're getting a little frustrated because nothing has happened all day. So Silver tries to incentivize Duo into slipping up somehow. When he saw Duo change his eye colors, the fake cat was in danger. So, by that reasoning, he's going to give Duo a little bit of a scare to see if he can get a reaction. So, with a little flick of his psychic finger, he attempts to send Duo over a ledge, but he quickly grabs a railing with his foot. And right before he's about to slip, he is caught by Lanolin, who says enough's enough and tells Silver to come on out. While Silver has been trying to tail Duo all day, Lanolin has been trailing him. Apparently, it was pretty obvious, as we just saw, that Silver is not great at stealth, and if Lanolin could see what he was up to, obviously Duo was aware as well. But Lanolin is just amused. She wants to know what he's even doing, and that is when Whisper steps out of the brush. Silver and Whisper quickly explain that they believe Duo to be lying about his identity, accusing the cat of being an octopus, saying that that is Mimic. But Lanolin requires proof of such accusations, and Whisper says they don't, but they will soon. They just have to make him crack. And somewhat reasonably, Lanolin steps in and says she's not going to allow Whisper to harass a teammate. And when Whisper goes in to grab Lanolin, Lanolin slams the wolf to the ground. Never thought I'd see a sheep take down a wolf, but that's the magic of Sonic comics. Good for her. She is a soldier, as is Whisper, and Lanolin is quick to remind her of that. She expects better self-control. If there's a problem within the team, Lanolin expects them to talk about it, but Whisper is not having, and honestly, who can blame her? She kick-sweeps Lanolin, and a short little fight breaks out between the two of them. As all that's happening, Duo makes a break for it, and Silver gives chase after, using his psychic abilities to pick up all the chairs and tables around the cat, telling the fake kitty that he's not going anywhere, taking one of the seats and scooping Duo up into it. And Duo just uses this as another opportunity. As the moment he sees Silver flick his wrists, the cat leaps out of the chair, falling to the ground and feigning injury. And this stops all the commotion instantly, as the crowd that has built up around them simply sees Silver attacking an innocent civilian, or teammate, I guess. Jewel and Tangle arrive on the scene, calling for a medic, and Whisper is distraught, saying that she was so sure it was Mimic, but apparently Mimic wouldn't do something like this? I don't know. She doesn't finish the sentence. And as she's wont to do, Whisper begins crying. She does that a lot. But Tangle comes in for emotional support, saying that it's hard to stop fighting, but it's okay to let yourself rest. Jewel asks Lanolin who started all this, and the sheep, without a word, just points over to Silver. The sheep's pretty pissed off, and says that it's probably best that Silver doesn't hang around with the team, at least until he learns to act a little bit more responsibly. Whisper, feeling guilty, tells Silver to go. She doesn't want to misguide him again. And unfortunately, even Tangle has to back up her two other teammates as much as it pains her. Silver, looking guilty, looking defeated, walks away in shame. And Duo, or rather Mimic, has gotten exactly what he wanted. Silver is no longer a concern of his. Now, I have seen a lot of people really frustrated with these two issues, and I can't exactly blame them. I mean, obviously a little bit of that is meant to be the case. You're meant to really, really dislike Duo, but I do think, unfortunately, the blast radius of that hate has landed on some of the other characters, specifically Lanolin. Seen a lot of hate for the sheep after this. I was pretty frustrated too. Like, maybe trust Whisper a little bit more than that. But at the same time, I'm kind of tired of Whisper just breaking down in tears every time something doesn't go correctly. Like, I get it, she's been through a lot of trauma, and there were times in the comic when her emotional outburst really was impactful, and I know they just needed to get Silver out of the equation, and it makes enough sense, but it is a little frustrating. I won't lie. Whatever the case, I think the story is fine. And ultimately, I just want to see Duo get his comeuppance. I'm really enjoying that character. Speaking of, we do catch up with the fake cat in the hospital as Jewel comes to greet him, introducing herself and her role in the restoration, apologizing for the experience that he faced as a new recruit, and she suggests that it might be best for Duo to temporarily help the bug out in her office. That should keep him away from any other physical violence violence, at least for a little while, until he's ready. And Duo happily agrees to the offer. But of course, as we know, this simply means that the enemy is that much closer to the heart of the restoration operation. So we will see how that all plays out eventually, I'm sure. But that is not where the issue ends. That is just story 1. There is one that follows up with the day trip shared between Sonic and Blaze in Spagonia. The two speedy heroes rush through the Emeraldville ruins and across the garden of Silver the Hedgehog, looking quite bummed. And while I'm sure the Sonic and Blaze shippers got all up in a tizzy from issue 63, now we get ourselves a good old-fashioned subtle love triangle, as Blaze notices Silver is upset and just chucks her food over to Sonic, quickly turning her attention over to the Psychic Hedgehog. She asks if he's alright, and he says no, he's messed things up, and Blaze quickly picks up on his problem. They are really tight after all. She's aware that he is struggling to find his purpose in this time period, so she asks him, does he want his garden to flourish? To which he says, of course. She asks, you want to harvest its bounty eventually? And he says, yes. To which she asks one more question. Will you achieve that with bold, proactive action, or with small, dedicated efforts over time? And Silver looks over his work, picking up what she's putting down, thanking her for the solid advice, and always able to make things just make a little more sense. It's a touching moment between these two beloved characters that's rudely interrupted with a loud slurp from Sonic the Hedgehog, just staring at the two of them, saying that they're great together. I do love that even for a single page, you kind of forget that anybody else is there. It's just this touching moment between Blaze and Silver, but Sonic is still Sonic, and he doesn't like being ignored or not being the center of attention. Yeah, he's matured quite a bit compared to his classic version, but it's still a very Sonic moment. It's precious. There's an awkward moment that Sonic's completely oblivious to, but he says he means it. The two of them always seem perfectly in sync. They really complement each other as a duo, comparing the two of them to him and Tails, trusting each other, covering each other's blind spots, and making sure they don't miss meals. He says that with a wink because this whole time he's been trying to get food over to Amy and Tails. So he says his goodbye to his two friends as he heads off to see his other two friends and finally feed them. And as Sonic departs, Silver sums up the relationship perfectly when he says, there are days I honestly don't know whether he's the coolest guy in the world or if I should throw a car at him, which gets an uncharacteristic loud laugh out of Blaze, but she quickly composes herself, saying that he can come off strong, but that's part of his charm, and that Silver and Sonic aren't that different when you consider everything. They both prefer to act decisively and strikingly. They both have immense power, and all they want to do is protect others, and that is noble. It's commendable. And Silver says maybe that's why him and Blaze are so in sync, because as he points out, she's not too different from him and Sonic, going by that logic. She is a princess of an empire. She's got tremendous power on top of that. And either one of those two facts could make her unapproachable, but instead, she uses her position of power to protect people, not because she has to, but because she wants to. And Silver finds that inspiring. And these two characters from different dimensions and different times say with a smile that this world certainly seems to bring out the best of them. And Silver wouldn't mind seeing a little bit more of it. And Blaze agrees there's still a lot more to see and understand, and says that the two of them should go explore it together right now. And with that, the two friends head off on a new adventure, with Blaze saying that there's a city called Soliana that she hears is lovely this time of year. Silver says that sounds good to him and tells her to lead the way. And that is where we're going to end the story for now. So obviously they're cooking up a lot of stuff with Mimic. They're placing him in a very important spot that I'm sure is going to be a big problem for our heroes, and I am interested to see how that all plays out in Clutch's grander plan. And while the comic has been much slower than a lot of fans would like, if you are a fan of these often overlooked characters, that being Blaze and Silver, However, I think you're going to have a lot of fun with these stories. They're both written very well, and it feels like Blaze is allowed to actually stretch her emotions out a little bit more than what we see in some of the games. Slow or not, you can tell this was made by people who genuinely love this era of Sonic, one that's often lambasted and hated quite a bit. I mean, for crying out loud, they even reference Soliana here. Yet another reference to Sonic 06 we've seen in recent months, outside of, the obvious inclusion of Silver himself. I do think it's interesting. Doesn't sound like he knows what Soliana is, so maybe the ending of 06 is still intact. I don't know. Point is, it's good to see them embrace more and more of the history, because there's a lot to explore here, no matter how bad the game was taken at the time of release. As for Blaze, I think she's great. Never been the biggest fan of some parts of her design, but overall I just love the character, so whatever. She was in the first proper Sonic Boost game, and I thought it was kind of cool that she got to explore an area from Sonic Unleashed and Sonic Generations. Unleashed is the first 3D Boost game, and instead of bringing in the secondary character that helped usher in that era of the Hedgehog, we instead got a Werehog. So it's kind of cool to see her explore these parts of the world we didn't get to see with her in the games. At least not yet. Who knows what the future holds. But that's it for now. Just some nice, quiet stories, but they're clearly building up to something much bigger, and I think they're subtly pushing these two fan favorite characters towards being a more permanent fixture. I have personally complained about how sluggish some of the storytelling can feel from month to month waiting for these books to come out, no matter how much I love the character interactions or the art or the references. But like I've also said, I think I'm going to miss these kind of smaller, quieter, kinder stories much further down the line. And who knows, maybe they're just planting some very important seeds for some big important stories we'll be seeing when they come back from their hiatus. But that covers most of the Mimic and Duo story, at least for right now. We've got some other stuff to move on to. Welcome back to Sonic Speed Reading. Today, we're going to be getting caught up with everything that's been going on right before the book took its hiatus for the Fang miniseries. Issue 67, which got a lot of the fanbase buzzing. Is it because it looks like Surge and Kit are turning over a new leaf and becoming good guys? No, not at all. The fanbase didn't trust them for a second, and as we'll soon find out, our heroes don't either. No, what actually got everybody all hot and bothered was just this opening scene here where Sonic blasts into Restoration HQ and sees Amy sitting down having tea with Surge. You know how this fanbase is, you know how they love to ship things, and my dearest friend Stevie, who has done so many of the amazing thumbnails for my channel, has been a fan of this particular pairing for quite a while, and I think she was proud of the rest of you for catching up to her next level shipping. Got a lot of people trying to hook up Surge and Amy, and you know what? I'm here for it.
You've got a really progressive PC dad who knows all about this stuff, okay? Go ahead, ask me anything.
I just don't understand how it's decided.
Well, you see, it's a combination of genetic, hormonal, and environmental influences.
No, I mean, like, what makes the Asians decide who they're gonna make gay?
The Asians? The Asians decide who's going to be gay?
As you'd expect, this has Sonic quite confused. Sonic asks Amy, "You do know who these guys are, right?" And Amy tells him to calm down. It might sound crazy, but as it turns out, Surge and Kid came to Restoration with the intent of peace, saying they wanted to turn their lives around. As Surge herself pointed out, during their first interaction, Sonic was willing to let that first fight simply be a rocky start and willing to have a do-over. According to Surge, Sonic made it sound so simple, so she said, "What the heck? Let's give it a shot." Sonic, with a raised eyebrow, asks, "Yeah, just like that?" And that's where the comic takes us back to the abandoned Starline base Sigma. This is where Surge and Kit have been hanging out since their last encounter with the heroes. They are down to their last bits of rations. Fortunately, it was all Kit could find. The base doesn't have power, so anything perishable has been rotting. There isn't much stuff for them to forage around the base itself. Eggman is aware of their existence, so they can't exactly sneak into an active base, and they don't exactly belong in polite society, as Kit points out. So they are running out of options. And things get worse as they hear a rumbling outside, as we see a pair of giant super badniks tearing the base down. Kit and Surge go in to take them them out, and they come across Rough and Tumble, who are very, very quickly overpowered by the Fennec Fox and Tenric. Surge says she will show no mercy to Eggman goons, but the skunks say they don't work for Eggman. So Surge obviously asks, well then what's with all the Eggman tech? To which we get the reveal of none other than Clutch. He introduces himself with a good old-fashioned tip of the hat, "M'lady." He apologizes, saying that he had assumed that the late Dr. Starline's base was no longer occupied. Now, whether or not that's true, I don't know. Clutch seems to have his homework done pretty readily. It's very likely he intended to come across this pair. Whatever the case, when Surge asks how Clutch knew Dr. Starline, he says that the platypus was a frequent client of his. After all, Clutch collects any abandoned Eggman tech after his many, many battles and assaults. But what he also implies is that Starline would go to Clutch for all kinds of resources, meaning that Clutch provided Starline with the equipment and the means to make Surge and Kit what they are today. And in turn, Clutch knows exactly who the pair are. And he knows that they don't mind getting their hands dirty, and they're not exactly friends with Sonic and his buddies. And with that knowledge, he asks if they can cut a deal. He explains his shtick and his current scheme with Clean Sweep Incorporated, how he plans to take over Restoration HQ, take it down from the inside, and he would like the help of Surge and Kit. And in return, he will tell the pair everything he knows about them. In case you don't recall, these two were brainwashed and turned into superhuman cyborgs, so they don't know anything about their past lives before Starline got a hold of them, and Surge quickly agrees to the deal. But Kid asks, how do they plan to infiltrate them? How are they even going to get near their headquarters? And Surge says she knows just how to get in through the front door. And that brings us back to the present day, with Sonic asking Surge, yeah, just like that? And Surge responding, yeah, just like that. And Sonic says, cool, glad you came around. Look, it's really challenging to properly do time jumps in stories. It's usually an obnoxious cliche, but the comedic timing for this was perfect. I was wondering why they were interjecting it the way they did, but it was worth it for that payoff. And it also helps convey Surge and her view on Sonic. To her, his outlook is very naive, very hypocritical, and very foolish. But we quickly get a short little conversation as Sonic says that Amy will give the two of them a grand tour of the place. She whispers to Sonic to keep an eye on them. He just responds, oh, you betcha. And they do give them a genuine tour of their facility, with Amy pointing out how the dining and shopping works and how it's all supplied by this depot. Surge asks if they need all this stuff, and Amy says no, this is also where they organize supplies for anybody around the world. And here they run into Silver and Blaze. And when Blaze asks who Sonic's new friend is, Sonic says that this is Surge and she tried to destroy him a couple of times. And Blaze just looks on irritated, saying that Sonic needs to stop making friends like this. Surge looks on a bit confused, and they take a moment just to show how goofy the relationships are for Sonic. He's fought with Blaze, he's fought with Silver. Amy rolls her eyes, talking about the many times he's fought with Knuckles and Shadow. It's a very cute trip down memory lane. It's a very fun way to explore his personality, I feel. And Surge asks, well, since she fought Sonic, does that mean she's an honorary member of the Restoration? Blaze says that they're not affiliated, they just like helping out. And Amy explains that this is a volunteer movement. Anyone can come and go as they please, and if it doesn't suit them, Surge can leave anytime she wants. And Surge says, with a wry smile, trying to get rid of me already, a little bit more seriously, Amy says she's trying to make clear that this is her choice. No one will force you to do anything you don't want to do here. And Surge hears her. She can tell that Amy really means that. See, this tour isn't just a front. They aren't just doing this just to keep an eye on Surge and Kit. Obviously they are. They're troublemakers. Sonic and Amy are not idiots. But this is a genuine attempt to reach out to them, to tell them that they always have a choice. There's always a chance to create a better life for yourself. They don't have to continue down a path of destruction. And at the same time, for the reader, I think this is doing a little bit more world building in terms of how the Restoration works and how they can be massively hurt. I have a feeling Clutch is going to be a very, very big problem soon. They continue their tour into the machine shop. Here, they maintain vehicles that deliver everything from the depot. This is also where they store search and rescue craft. Surge says she's had her fill of gadgets, but tech is more Kit's thing, saying that the little Aqua Fox can come down here and show Tails how it's done. And Kit, who's been silent this whole time, just looks around, leering. Now the nameless not-rotor orangutan comes up to greet the two of them, extending his hand out to shake the hand of Kit, excited to welcome another young aspiring gearhead, saying he's always welcome, but Kit just leers, leaving the orangutan uncomfortable. Sonic goes up to greet Belle, who is in the workshop working on Whisper's Wispin, and rightfully freaking out when she sees that Surge is there. Belle is obviously concerned about their presence, pointing out that Starline made them, but Sonic points out that Eggman has made Gemerald and Omega, and Belle finishes the thought. She understands that her father, even if he was Tinker at one point, was Eggman. She is yet another Eggman creation, technically. But while Belle is reconsidering her position, Surge has to ruin it, pointing out that she thought she ruined the gizmo that Belle is tinkering with. This is, of course, as I said, Whisper's Wispin. As we saw in a previous story, Belle did rebuild it, and she's currently fine-tuning it, so we might potentially be seeing some more creative ways to expand her Wisp arsenal. That might be fun. Belle was actually just about to deliver the Wispin to Whisper directly, and Sonic sees that as a perfect opportunity for Surge and Kit to be introduced to the Diamond Cutters. Amy's not entirely sure that's a good idea given the circumstances, but Surge says, "Why question Sonic's judgment? I'm sure it'll be fine." And we cut to an awkward silence with Duo, Lanolin, Tangle, and Whisper. Obviously, Duo is looking at the rest of his team a bit nervously, but the three gals can't pay him any attention. They are not happy to see Surge and Kit. But Surge is just enjoying this uncomfortable situation, nudging Sonic saying, "Go on, say something." Sonic does his best to keep the peace, saying that he understands that there's bad blood here for good reason, but he figures that if given a chance, Surge and Kit would be awesome in the Diamond Cutters. Amy interjects, saying only if they want to join. Sonic wants to know why wouldn't they want to kick butt, and Surge, looking a little bit more stern than she has this whole time, says that they are in the room and they have thoughts and opinions of their own. Duo, of course, thinks it's a great idea. After all, this team gave him a chance, and having a pair on par with the likes of Sonic and Tails would be a massive help to the Cutters. Oh man, that's a terrible shorthand term for that group. Oh god. And begrudgingly, poor Lanolin, she looks so tired in these pages, says she has her concerns, but if they're coming from the recommendation of former Commander Rose, she won't object. Amy looks exasperated, saying that they've been through this. Now, I will say this, if you don't mind me interrupting really quickly here. I got some people getting really upset with me when I compared Lanolin to Sally Acorn, even though there are some very obvious parallels there, as there are to this entire setup. But the more we see of Lanolin, the more the writers and artists are getting a chance to give a bit of dimension to what Lanolin is as a character on her own terms. I pointed out before, Lanolin did come across as a civilian the first time we saw her, but I think they're retroactively trying to portray her as a proper soldier. She takes military rank very, very seriously, like to a fault. And because of that, regardless of whatever she thinks, she respects the chain of command and will go along with whatever Amy feels is best, because she respects Amy as a leader. Tangle is much more of a free spirit, but she identifies and agrees with Sonic's outlook. So if Sonic thinks it's a good idea, she's going along with him. So yes, these two characters are going by the judgment of their two friends for two very different reasons. But Whisper flat out says no. And good for her. I was feeling a little bit bummed out with all of her crying over a cat falling out of a chair in the last issue. Sonic tries to sway her mind, but Whisper's just not having it. And Surge responds with laughter, snatching the Wispin out of Belle's hand and handing it over to Whisper, saying that she was the first to show any sense in this entire facility. It's obvious to Surge that Whisper wants to take her out right here and now before she becomes a problem later. And Surge obviously respects that. She says that maybe she will join this little club, and Whisper can point her gun at the back of Surge's head anytime she wants. She wouldn't blame Whisper. In fact, Surge encourages it. Stubbornly, Whisper agrees, saying fine, but she will be watching. And poor little Kit finally says something, saying that if Surge is joining, he's going to join as well. Poor guy. But that's it for the introductions. We later find Sonic, Amy, Surge, and Kit overlooking the plaza, with Surge saying she has to admit it's a pretty impressive setup, but it'd be a shame if somebody burned it to the ground. And Sonic, still overlooking the productive little society, with a smile on his face, says, yeah, a bigger shame is what'll happen to the idiot who tries that. And with that, he turns his head, giving Surge a hashtag knowing smile. And it is subtle little moments like that which make me love this comic. This is Sonic showing Surge that, yeah, you can disagree with my ideals all you want, but I'm not an idiot. It's not a matter of just blindly trusting people. It's simply the confidence Sonic has in himself to handle whatever Surge might attempt to do. That's a hell of a flex. It's really, really cool. And you can tell it makes Surge a little bit nervous. But just then, Duo interrupts everybody, saying that he just got himself set up here, so Lanolin sent him to help Surge and Kit settle into a place of their own, to which Surge agrees to, and they're done with the tour anyway. And with Sonic and Amy left alone, they finally have a moment to talk about this. His recent interaction with Mecha Sonic and the others on Scrapnik Island helped remind him that everybody deserves a second chance. A third, even. Yeah, these guys are rough, but Surge and Kit had their lives stolen from them by a greater evil. And to Sonic, he feels that they should at the very least have a chance to make a better life for themselves, since they lost their old ones. And with that, the two hedgehogs head off to grab some dinner. I gotta say, it's never flat out saying that Sonic or anyone are dating each other, but they're still giving some crumbs here for all the shipping fans, I feel. Like, yeah, you could see these all as just friends, which is fine. It's nice to see this familiarity between everybody, but like Sonic and Blaze got a lot of attention on Twitter, and this little scene right here got the Son Amy shippers all up in a tizzy, and it really does feel like there is like a long-standing relationship. If I didn't know anything about the franchise and I saw these two and the way they interact with each other, I would say that they are in a long-term relationship. Again, could just be friends, but there's a love and familiarity between the two of them. So even if it's never official, I still think this is very sweet. But anyway, let's get back to the end of the story, where we see Duo showing off the room to Surge and Kit. And Surge says it'll do, there's no leaks or drafts anyway. And Duo, who has been so polite and well-mannered this entire time in front of everybody, says with a smirk that he took the liberty of getting a room that these two could share since they're both so codependent. And Surge is impressed, saying Kitty's got claws. And that's when Duo reveals his true identity. Turns out that Clutch told Mimic to make contact with these two once they arrived and got settled in the restoration. Now that they've made contact, they just have to keep up the act and play nice with everybody. And when Clutch is ready, he'll send the order, they'll hit their targets, and he'll come in and take advantage of the chaos. So now we have a really big, nasty plan in motion for all of these bad guys that aren't Eggman. And while things have been relatively chill, I do really like the slow burn of all of this with these characters that they've been building up throughout the different stories in IDW. I really, really like the characters introduced from this series. But that is the end of issue 67, and we will have to wait quite a while before we see any of this pay off. But if the creative team is to be believed, we're in for something special once this book returns from hiatus. For issue 68 itself, this is just a fun little adventure with Sonic and Tails, where they go out with the intention of both finding a Chaos Emerald and testing out the modifications on the Yellowtail Extreme gear. The Yellow-Orange War rages on even in Tails' equipment. But we not only get a nod to the Rider games, we also get a nod to early 3D Sonic level design, as Sonic and Tails do an oopsie and end up losing control and falling into a bottomless pit. Which, alright, it's not all that bottomless. They end up in a cave system them, which leads them into this unique little ecosystem filled with vegetation and a glowing river, where we see a little salamander splash into. Wonder if that's going to be important. I doubt it's a reference, but this does remind me of an episode of Sonic Sat AM where an underground environment was sustained by some magical green liquid. Oh, and this giant salamander reminds me of the bio lizard. Yeah, I guess that's a bit of a problem. The rest of the issue revolves around Sonic and Tails dealing with this giant salamander. The conflict ending when Tails takes notice to how the animal is reacting. It's not really on the offense, it's clearly in a more defensive stance. They realize the salamander is just protecting its home, so Sonic attempts to communicate with it, saying that he will leave the Chaos Emerald here if the salamander wishes that, but he also explains that somebody will come for it. Simply having the emerald here puts the salamander's home in danger. Sonic promises to keep the emerald safe and in turn keep this ecosystem safe as well. Well, it's clear the salamander understands what Sonic is saying as it moves a rock aside to let the duo out. And that's it. That's the story. This, as you might have noticed, feels like a strange departure from the ever-growing danger present at Restoration HQ, if you have been paying attention to that storyline anyway. After all, this has been called the Misadventures arc, which has been more about random little adventures and these interactions between specific characters. All of them do have little connections to each other, and that could be the case here. This does feel like a standalone story, but we haven't seen the Emerald since the end of the Metal Virus, and considering how important those things are, I'm sure this will come into play at some point down the road. And outside of that, as always, there's some fun speculation on my end simply from this comic. Was that little salamander the same as the giant one we saw just a few panels later? Or did that little one just represent the effect of this glowing liquid on the fauna? Tails does explain that the salamander is huge, so clearly that's not the standard size. Again, we see the little salamander right there, clearly representing how big they're actually supposed to get. But then again, this world also has giant turtles, giant snakes, giant frogs. We have seen all of those in games, and all that makes me wonder, did the Chaos Emerald cause this reaction in the ecosystem? Is emerald energy causing this river to glow, and in turn, is it causing the salamander to mutate? And in a broader sense, have the giant versions of animals we've seen scattered throughout the games been the result of Chaos Emerald energy in the world? I don't know if it was ever meant to spiral out that much. It was just a fun thought experiment for me. Ultimately not that important. I just thought it was kind of cool if we had a super salamander here. Welcome back to Sonic Speed Reading. Now, last time I spoke about the IDW run, I lamented the general pace of the book, but I've had a lot of people tell me that things immediately turned around with the issue that released right after I released my video. And there was certainly a lot of buzz surrounding the previews, as we were not only teased with a story inspired by the Sonic Rider series, but also with the mystery of a Phantom Rider. Well, this story has been running for quite a bit, so I figured we'd get caught up with these next few videos before their milestone 75th issue. So let's kick things off with issue 69. Nice. The issue wastes no time getting us into the action. We pick up right at the start of the first event of the Clean Sweepstakes, a charity event put together by the combined efforts of the Restoration and Clean Sweep Incorporated. And all this is being announced by Night the Owl, who is sitting aboard the Restoration's giant shuttle, which will prove to be a very important setting for this story. And speaking of the story, there are going to be a lot of little plot threads that all come to a head in this tale. If you don't recall, Clean Sweep is a cover for Clutch, a shady black market crime lord who does his best work from the shadows, and he's been planning his lackeys within the Restoration with the intention of taking it down. But hey, I'm taking up more time getting to the action than the comic itself. Everybody is here for one reason or the other. Sonic and his pals just love a good race. The Babylon Rogues are here for the cash prize, and the rest will become obvious as the story kicks off. For now, this is just a qualifying race. As long as you can make it past the finish line within the time limit, you're good to go. With all that said, the race kicks off. And as you can see, Aaron Hammerstrom's art is once again beautifully conveying the motion and energy that helps Sonic flow even when the picture isn't moving at all. And it works really well with the writer's story. You can tell Evan and Aaron had a lot of fun putting together a book based around this fan favorite side series of the franchise. But it's not just the action that looks pretty, but all the little details. The IDW art team really loves to design the hell out of the random Mobian crowds, and yes, I'm still going to call the furries Mobians because I don't want to call them furries. It's It's a good term and you can't stop me. And this time, it's not just the crowds or background riders that get the great designs, but also the gear they ride. We get some really unique designs, and Tails, of course, takes notice to all the wild tech, which is used as a convenient excuse to drop in some much needed context, such as the extreme gears that Sonic and Tails are riding being experimental prototypes, which was established in issue 68. You might have missed that if you watched my coverage, since I spent so much time whining. Anyway, as the race starts off, the comic briefly turns its attention to a couple of Clean Sweep mascots on the stadium screens, Dr. Yoke and his little crab meat sidekick named Nick. Can't help but wonder if the IDW team is getting sick and tired of my nonsense. Anyway, these are cute characters here to make fun of Dr. Eggman, and yes, this is going to be important for later. But this also makes me smile and just hits me in the nostalgia. Yeah, the Rider series gets a lot of love, and I'm glad a lot of those fans get their nostalgic hit, but this page here with Crab Meat Nick reminds me a lot of the early Archie days, where Robotnik had a Crab Meat sidekick, and like I keep saying, the early day Badniks are some of the best flunkies the Doctor has ever had. Even if that wasn't an intentional callback, this still reminded me of those old comics, so that made me smile. But that aside, there's no mistaking Dr. Yoke's insult, Nincombot. This was a common insult used by Robotnik in Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog.
You are Nincombots!
Now, don't get me wrong, I will still be a big pain in the ass to Sega while I whine about getting the return of legacy Western characters, but that aside, I still appreciate these simple, lovely little callbacks. They're greatly appreciated. But I digress. The story shifts its focus to Clutch and Jewel, the two leaders of their respective groups, who are running the event, with Chaos Cola, as always, serving as a stand-in for alcohol. And I'm not remotely mad about it. I actually love that they lean in so hard by making the name of the soda more and more ridiculous. Limited edition Chaos Cola Extreme Blast. And Clutch, intimidating as he is, still goes out of his way to say the entire name in full, and that is adorable. Anyway, this scene is here to both establish the characters and their place in this story. And on top of that, it also is here to juxtapose the two very different leadership styles and personalities of Clutch and Jewel. I keep forgetting, Clutch, is it possum? Do you pronounce the O in opossum? Well, I just looked it up. Yes, you do say opossum. I actually have one of those living in my neighborhood, by the way. I keep trying to rescue some alley cats because it's getting cold outside, but this stupid idiot opossum just keeps activating this trap I have and eating all the cat food. And every time I just try to shake him out, he just won't leave. So I think he just lives in this doghouse next to my house. I think I have an opossum. Anyway, Jewel feels she should be down among the people representing the restoration, but the way Clutch sees it, making yourself a figurehead, an individual, exposes you, makes you fallible, makes you weak. But taking a step back and letting the world see the restoration as an institution rather than an individual will make you untouchable. This is the opossum's philosophy in general. This is how he works. He's the main villain of this story, and the heroes are completely oblivious to that fact. Outside of a handful of people, nobody even knows Clutch is running Clean Sweep, and he intends to keep it that way, but more on that later. It's clear Jewel is uncomfortable around Clutch, but concedes that Clean Sweep's work speaks for itself, so there might be something to what he's saying, but unfortunately she has to cut their conversation short as she's pulled back into work, which means, unfortunately, she will miss out on the race. But speaking of the race, we get back to Sonic, Amy, and Tails. And I do have to say, it's nice to see them in their rider getups. I know they like to keep the Sonic characters on model as often as possible, but as we will see in this story, hopefully Sega is letting the art team flex a little bit more here when it comes to different outfits. Of course, Sonic and pals come face to face with the Babylon Rogues. And I gotta admit, while they have had a couple strong moments in the IDW series, usually when they show up they get dogged on pretty hard, and don't get me wrong, they do still have that happen to them here in this story, but it's nice to see them in their element, with Jet being as annoying as ever as he talks a bunch of trash to Sonic, all while Swallow is emasculating poor little Tails over his tech work, and let's be real, probably making him feel some very confusing things. I get it, Tails, that's a very hot bird. Does it still count as a furry if she's covered in feathers? Anyway, the banter between these six characters is just a lot of fun. I love seeing Amy being protective of Tails and not taking any crap from Storm, and Sonic showing up Jet's smack talk with a simple smirk and a boost of speed is simply perfect. Just great energy to this entire interaction. But again, Jet is at home on his hoverboard, and it doesn't take the birds long to catch up with the mammals. And when they do, Jet rams rams his X gear into Sonic's, which gets a reaction from the Diamond Cutters. And this is where we learn that Tangle, Whisper, Lanolin, and Duo aren't here to race, but instead serve as the security force for the event. There is a wider security team, but the Diamond Cutters specifically police the race by being a part of the action. And the sheep scolds the green bird. Again, we get a cute interaction with Tangle since she's on the scene. Love that lemur. Now, all of this is great fun, but just when you feel they're establishing the relationships and roles for what we'd assume to be a story set around a racing tournament, a button is pressed, and suddenly Amy's extreme gear begins to freak out. And when Sonic and Tails turn around to help, their boards also act wild and then send the two flying off their extreme gear. So things take a drastic turn, but before we can see what happens, the comic jumps backwards in time to provide us with some much needed context. While getting everything prepared for the event, Mimic brings Clutch a list of all the contenders, pointing out those who could end up being problematic if they ever got close enough to discover who was actually running the show. Of course, as soon as Sonic, Tails, and Amy are shown, Clutch decides something needs to be done about them. Amazingly, he stayed off Sonic's radar, which is interesting when you consider that Clutch has been around in the comic series for a while at this point, but he's never run into the main character. He has, unfortunately for him, run into Amy Rose, so the Pink Hedgehog is well aware of Clutch and his nasty schemes. She's a problem on her own, and of course Sonic and Tails would be as well. So he sends Mimic off with the instructions to tinker with their extreme gears as they have been turned in for pre-race inspection. We then move to the second phase of the plan. The next morning, Mimic meets up with Surge and Kit, instructing them to hit a button on a remote to cause the hoverboards of the heroes to freak out. Surge, of course, protests. Underhanded, sneaky nonsense is not her style. She is loud and she is violent. If she is meant to take out Sonic, then just let her take out Sonic her way. But Clutch pops in and flexes his power, reminding Surge of her place. Surely that won't be a problem later. She responds well to authority. Anyway, for now, she agrees with the plan, and now we cut back to the present, where we see Tails carrying Sonic towards Amy's rescue. They grab a hold of the Pink Hedgehog, but before they can do something about their wild and crazy gears, a shot rings through, taking them all out. With one move, Whisper has taken out the faulty extreme gear, but unfortunately, this also means that Sonic, Tails, and Amy are all disqualified from the race. And I will admit, first time I read this, that was not the direction I was expecting this story to go. And I also didn't expect the most interesting part of this comic to take place in a diner. Not only is this just a fun setting, love the old school Americana style diner, it's fun to see our heroes here, and I love the little squiggly cheat server. Just great designs for all these extra characters all around. Anyway, Tails is feeling pretty crummy. He feels that this is all his fault. All of his gear screwed up, and it caused them to get kicked out of the race. A race that you would assume, if this was any normal story, would have just seen Sonic winning the whole thing eventually. But Amy reminds Tails not to beat himself up. Something feels wrong about what happened. Her board wasn't an experimental prototype, so his assumption that he did something wrong doesn't make sense. And on top of that, the Clean Sweep staff were huge jerks. They wouldn't let anybody from the restoration talk to the heroes after the race. Something seems fishy. And with his brilliant mind once again on the case, Tails remembers that the only time their X gear were out of their sight was when they were being examined on the restoration's main shuttle. And Amy points out, obviously, they should investigate and figure out what happened. But as Tails points out, the sweepstakes is touring the world. That's why they're on the restoration shuttle. And once it's airborne, it's not going to be coming down, and it'll be nearly impossible to get inside. And I love seeing these three plan like this because it shows you what their priorities are and what their philosophies are. Because Sonic just assumes, well, we just take the tornado and we just bust in. Who cares? But Tails points out, if they do that, they're going to ruin the sweepstakes, and it defeats the entire purpose of investigating to see if anything's fishy. Remember, they don't actually know if anything suspicious suspicious has happened yet, and they could just potentially be ruining this grand giant event for selfish reasons. But just then, they are interrupted by Dr. Eggman in some fantastic drip, I must say. He's got this undercover vibe going, but this is also a reference to Sonic Shuffle, where he had all kinds of costumes. I really got to give that game another chance. I don't like playing it, but man, it's a weird time. But yeah, like I said, it's great to see all these characters in different costumes and referencing some very obscure Sonic media. And of course, things get incredibly interesting because now we have Dr. Eggman, the greatest enemy of Sonic the Hedgehog, joining them at a diner to offer them some help. And I just love how everybody reacts. Amy's ready to hit him with a hammer, Sonic's ready to jump to action, and Tails is pissed too, and they're all just saying, Dr. Eggman, and he just doesn't care. He's just shoving right in next to Tails, ordering some food. That's adorable. I love this. Anyway, yeah, Eggman intends to help these three in their plans to investigate what's going on with Clean Sweep. And that's because he walked in on Orbot and Cubot watching the opening events and got a peek at those mascots, which made him good and proper pissed. So because of that, and because it's his personal mission to humiliate Sonic, not the Babylon Rogues, and not whoever was tinkering with their boards, he decides he's going to help his greatest enemy. He really is that petty. I love it. And he intends to help by offering Sonic his own extreme gear, which he names quite cleverly his Eggstream gear. Absolutely adorable. And it looks like I could just name 5 different Eggman robots that thing looks like. I'm just so thankful that even the new designs are so consistent with Sonic designs. Again, as much as I miss some old Archie bits and pieces here and there, they're really good designs. In the old days were very few and far between. And of course, Tails is all googly-eyed for it. I do like that weird, complicated relationship between the Doctor and the two-tailed fox. Tails can't help but admire Eggman's technical genius. Anyway, this Eggstream gear could serve as a distraction while Tails and Amy sneak aboard the shuttle, because not only is this a wicked fast little machine, it also has adaptive hard light camouflage, meaning that it can disguise whoever rides it. Now, at this point, we don't know if Eggman has another motive behind everything. It's likely he does, but we don't know for sure. If it ends up that he just wants Sonic to find out who Clean Sweep is being run by, simply because he hates the fact that they made fun of him, that would be hysterical. I would absolutely love that. But yeah, a plan is concocted between Eggman, Sonic, Tails, and Amy. And with that, we end issue 69. Welcome back to Sonic Speed Reading. Things are really kicking off in the current story arc as we begin our journey with the Phantom Rider. Now, leading up to the release of this comic book, there was a lot of speculation on who this would be. It was a lot of fun in terms of discussion. As I said before, there was a lot of meandering going on in the series leading up to this point, so it was a lot of fun to see a lot of people excited for a new mystery in the series. But as we saw at the end of this last issue, and as I'm sure many people deduced, it turned out the Phantom Rider was none other than Sonic himself. Now, while it was fun to discuss a mystery before the story came out, the story itself is not about that mystery. What makes it more fun now is just having our main character take on a masked identity, and with the help of his longtime enemy, Dr. Eggman. And we kick off issue 70 with the start of the next event of the Clean Sweepstakes, with Sonic, who has been disqualified at this point, looking over the event, ready to take action. We look over the race course and all of its insane traps, which, I mean, yeah, they look incredibly dangerous, but I like that this world just does this. I mean, Sonic himself will consider this fun. It justifies a lot of in-game obstacles, things of that nature. Very video gamey. I'm into it. As is Tangle, as we see her all starry-eyed. We look over all of the contestants ready to start the race, and Sonic is ready to jump in himself, and I love this pose. I also love a lot of the racer designs here. I know everybody on Twitter really loved this dude in the red jacket as he goes so hard slapping down his airboard. All while we see Sonic transform into what will be the Phantom Rider. This art is just going crazy. This is already a lot of fun. But as the race kicks off, it is quickly interrupted by Sonic, who is obviously in disguise, so nobody else knows who he is. He grabs our little cameraman and then announces to the world that he is the Phantom Rider, here to turn this whole place upside down, and saying that nobody else is fast enough to stop him, which obviously sets off Jet. Sonic takes off on his egg stream gear, which knocks somebody off the race course. Thankfully, they're quickly rescued by Tangle, and while that was unintentional on Sonic's part, that does give the impression to the Diamond Cutters that the Phantom Rider is a danger. This, of course, demands backup from security, and as they are called out, Tails and Amy make their way to the main shuttle. And as they hide behind some crates and overhear some references to Sonic Adventure 2, they make a quick battle plan, with Tails suggesting that they first stop at the machine shop, considering that that would be where their extreme gears were first tampered with. So they set off. And we head back to the race, where the Phantom Rider is giving Jet all kinds of annoying problems. Since Sonic, and in turn the Phantom Rider, are not technically a part of the race, he's not actually trying to win anything. He's just trying to be a little bit of a problem, a distraction for his friends. And as such, he pulls off some little things like a smoke bomb, which in turn gives him a chance to escape, feeling like he's done enough to cause a distraction and ready to take his leave. But unfortunately, he's set upon by the Diamond Cutters, and Lanolin wastes no time attacking. This sends Sonic into the glass tube he was just in. Security rains down upon him, but unfortunately, the glass is now unstable, and in turn, it all crashes, causing a whole lot of problems for the racers inside and the security surrounding them. Sonic quickly rescues one of the riders, asking him not to mention the save, and through the chaos, he once again tries to leave, but he is set upon yet again by someone else, this time by Surge. She obviously respects the Phantom Rider and all the chaos he caused, but also sees someone she can take all of her violence out on. So she charges up her fist, punches the side of the helmet, which quickly exposes the side of Sonic's face. Now at this point, we don't know if Surge caught a glimpse of him or not, but this is a warning sign to Sonic. This suit is nanotech after all, and it turns out it can be disrupted by electricity. So he kicks off Surge's bike, calls upon his extreme gear, and scurries off yet again. Now, by the perspective of everybody watching the race, the racers, the security, all of this looks like chaos intentionally started by the Phantom Rider. On Sonic's end of things, well, he's just not very good at being a bad guy. He started a bit of a problem, didn't know the power of his own gear, and stumbled through one disaster after another. The race ends with the 3 Babylon Rogues taking first, second, and third place, which is cute. I do like that they at least acknowledge how good they are as racers. That's kind of their thing. But the crowd isn't cheering for the birds. They're instead cheering for Surge and Kit. From their perspectives, they're the ones that chased off the Phantom Rider, unaware that Surge was only doing it for her bloodlust. But that doesn't matter to Surge. She's now getting something she's never had before, adoration, and she quickly takes a shine to the idea that she is a hero in the public's eyes. Jet, of course, takes it quite jealously, and I'm very excited to see what happens to the 2 green rivals in Sonic's life. Later on, we turn our attention to Duo and Jewel hanging out in her office. Duo is here to just catch her up on things, telling her that he wasn't able to get a hold of Amy Rose, and just assuming that Sonic and Pals just went along their merry way now that they've wrapped things up here at the events. And as they part ways, Jewel looks on seriously as she sips her tea, possibly indicating that she knows that Duo is up to something. But the shapeshifter then takes his information over to his real boss, that of course being Clutch. Clutch decides that to keep Jewel distracted, he'll have the next supply drop go missing. That should keep things busy while he deals with the sweepstakes. For the Phantom Rider, Clutch decides to keep hands off for now. As it turns out, the Phantom Rider is doing wonders for the viewership. That said, he does have a task to take the Phantom down, a task he hands off to Mimic. But we will deal with all that in the next issue. For now, we turn our attention back to Tails and Amy, who have made their way to the machine shop. And as Tails rummages around in a dumpster, Amy's attention is caught by the shuffling of extreme gear. She readies her hammer, moves closer, only to see a disembodied hand. Grabs Amy by the face, she swings her hammer around, and Tails Tails quickly grabs it off her before any damage is done. Now for old school, and by old school I mean early 2000s Amy fans, you might notice how quick she is to anger, all this other fun stuff, a few little quirks in her personality that you might have missed for a while, and this is not the last we will see of that. And obviously the giant heads we've been seeing everywhere are cute references to the over-exaggerated reactions that you would get while playing Sonic Riders. Anyway, Tails stopped all the commotion because he recognized the hand. Turns out it belongs to Belle. And the hand points in the direction of a locker. And of course, as Tails and Amy open up, they see their good friend Belle the Tinkerer tied up. And that is where issue 70 ends. Now that was a pretty fun yet chaotic premiere of the Phantom Rider that we were all so hyped for, but I'll save some analysis for after we're done going through each of these issues. Issue 71 kicks off right where 70 left off, with Tails and Amy and their shocked reaction as they found the tied up Belle. They release her, give her hand back, and she lets them know what's going on. Turns out that she was checking all the extreme gear, and when she got to Tails, she immediately recognized it was his work. But before she could get to her analysis, the Clean Sweep security absconded with them. She scolded the security. They're supposed to be helping the restoration, but instead they've practically taken over, and whatever she saw, Clutch didn't want anybody else to see, so they tied her up and left her in a locker. This is the one part about this world being as tame as it is. Normally you'd expect people to just kill any witnesses, especially Robot, but whatever. Ain't gonna be too stressed on it. I like Belle, I don't want her dead. Anyway, this reporting from Belle and the description of the boss connects a few dots. If you recall, Amy has run across Clutch herself before in the past, and after a quick chat with Belle, she quickly deduces that the opossum is behind everything. But while all of that is going on, we turn our attention back to another event of the Clean Sweepstakes, and I like that they're not all just races. Now we're in the Misty Spire with an airborne game of dodgeball, which looks pretty awesome. Jet has grown a bit jealous of Surge, so all of his attention is on the Tenric, and Sonic has returned as the Phantom Rider, ready to cause more problems. But before he does, the event is set upon by another Phantom Rider, talking smack to the Diamond Cutters, and then running around causing all kinds of problems. Grabbing a ball, feigning surrender, and then attacking Lanlin before making an escape, closely followed by all of the key racers. That would include Surge, Kit, the Babylon Rogues, and the security force that is the Diamond Cutters. But through the mist, Sonic also follows along as the original Phantom Rider. But in the mist, a different confrontation begins as Surge sets upon Tangle and Whisper. This is their first interaction since they fought back in Central City, and Surge is quick to point that out, saying, "Imagine what they'll say when I smear your little lemur friend across one of these rocks," which obviously pisses off Whisper, and she sets off after Surge. But as they head into the mist, they come across, well, Surge and Kit, but they are completely dumbfounded by the attack by Whisper. But the Tenric is not one to question why anyone would pick a fight. She's just going to fight. The counterattack sends Whisper into Jet, who gets ticked off, and they decide to join the battle as well. And if you haven't figured it out by now, that wasn't Surge talking crap in the mist, and it certainly wasn't a second Sonic the Hedgehog running around in a phantom suit. It has been, this entire time, Mimic, who has come across the real Phantom Rider, catches him off guard, and lets loose his helmet, revealing the identity of Sonic to Mimic, and soon after, the rest of the Riders. And remember, the Rogues, the Diamond Cutters, Surge and Kit, none of them knew that he wasn't that second Phantom Rider. But even without that, this isn't a good look for the Hedgehog. None of them are aware of why he's doing this after all. But before there are any explanations or anything else, one of the giant rock columns crumbles and separates Sonic from his friends and rivals, leaving Sonic by himself looking a little guilty. We later turn our attention to the Babylon Rogues, who have reconvened for some food, trying to figure out what the heck Sonic was doing. As much as Jet doesn't like the Hedgehog, he knows better than to think that Sonic would be paid off. These three know him well enough to know that he is the hero, and because of that, they immediately assume that somebody else is the bad guy. That somebody else is probably Clean Sweep. Now Jet is mad that Sonic figured out that Clean Sweep is full of crooks before he did. Jet won't stand for it, and he declares that the Rogues now have a new mission. As that's going on, Surge and Kit discuss the events between the two of them. Remember, she is working for Clutch, and she is completely confused as to why Sonic is running around as the Phantom Rider. This was supposed to be a simple gig, play nice nice until the opossum gave him a word, and then they'd rough up the restoration. But now she doesn't know what the heck is going on. But before she can continue her thought, she's interrupted by a fan. This little fan, which I'm assuming is named Ivy, considering the shirt, is not only a lovely reference and a slight hint of progression in the story that is Murder of Sonic the Hedgehog. If you've forgotten, that's the conductor's wife, and therefore that's their kid, so that means they started a family. That's adorable. But this is the first time Surge has been approached by a regular character, a child nonetheless, and was seen as a hero. This child obviously idolizes her, and little Ivy leaves waving, saying that someday she will be Spiky and punch a lot of bad guys too. That quick little interaction cemented something she's clearly been thinking about since she has been seen as a hero by the public. She tells Kit she doesn't think they can keep doing this. They don't deserve it. And Kit, as supportive as he is, says he doesn't understand what's going on, but when the crowd cheers for her, she lights up. The whole world lights up, and he would do anything to see that for her again. And also, for the first time in any of the comics, I'll go back and check, but no, I'm not. Somebody can correct me in the comments. But I think this is the first time that we've seen Kit completely open his eyes in excitement. This is a tender little moment for a couple of very broken individuals. So yeah, the focus is no longer on Sonic at all, but sounds like they're more talking about their future. We then turn to Duo and Lanolin, who is busy punching, well, a punching bag. She's real ticked since she was immediately taken out by that second Phantom Rider. Duo apologizes, saying that his first real action and all he has to show for it is a bump on his head, blaming this Phantom Rider for his injury. Obviously, since this is actually Mimic, he's just feigning an excuse for what he was doing while he was running around as that fake Phantom. And he continues to stir the pot, saying that Tangle and Whisper said the Phantom ran away, but he doesn't know, and plants the idea that those two might be hiding something to spare their feelings. It's hard to say what they'd do on their own, but he's lucky they always have Lanolin to guide them. Tangle overhears all this and then runs to her girlfriend, who they don't officially confirm is her girlfriend, but come on, we all know. And Whisper is sitting with all of her wisps. Now, that quick interaction confirms something we didn't know up to this point. Even though Tangle and Whisper know that Sonic is the Phantom Rider, they haven't said a thing to anybody. Tangle just can't give up on Sonic. Even though she knows what she saw, she doesn't believe it. Lanolin hates the Phantom Rider, and if they told her, well, Tangle's not sure what she would do. She just knows her and Whisper have to figure this out before they go to the rest of the Diamond Cutters. But while Tangle was talking, Whisper had her mask on the whole time, and she cuts Tangle off mid-sentence, takes her mask off, and tells the lemur to take a look at something. As it turns out, back when they fought Mimic together, all the way back in their mini-series, she stopped recording video in her mask. She thought she wouldn't need to anymore, but after everything that happened with Silver, which is again earlier on in the Misadventures, if you want to get caught up with that, she decided to start recording again because she no longer trusts herself. She no longer trusts what she sees, but she trusts what her mask sees, and she trusts Tangle. So she has the lemur try on her mask to see some distinct differences between the two times the rider showed up. And as they can see, that second rider, the more violent one, had a slightly different color for his visor, a completely different X gear, other little details when compared to Sonic's getup, which they also saw that same day. And it's important to tell the difference because Whisper noticed that the Phantom Rider did not directly attack anybody that first time he showed up, as opposed to the second. So while they still don't know what Sonic is up to, that at least proves to Tangle that something else is going on here, and Sonic is probably up to something more noble than what they saw from that second rider. So we end these three diverging conversations with Tangle and Whisper determined to figure out the real mystery behind Sonic, the Rogues determined to find out what's going on with Clean Sweep, and Surge and Kit deciding that they are going to earn the right to be heroes. But while all of that is happening, we then turn our attention to Mimic, reporting into Clutch that the Phantom Rider has been Sonic the Hedgehog this whole time. And Clutch is not happy about it. He did not ever want this much attention from Sonic, and he is mad, saying that he will pull out his quills one by one and make him eat them. His plans look to be falling apart, but before he loses his temper, he apologizes to Mimic, saying his temper does flare up sometimes, but it's not his fault, and he has to get back to work, saying the next time the Phantom shows himself at his sweepstakes, it will be the last. And that, my friends, is where issue 71 ends. Issue 72 kicks off with Surge and Kit walking into Clutch's office, proudly declaring that they quit. Clutch just laughs, spitting out his cola. And now with Surge screaming at Clutch, I'm just realizing how many green characters are in IDW Sonic, and I'm very thankful for it. Thank you guys. Great color. But yeah, Clutch does not take them or their resignation seriously. As he explains to Surge, he sees what's going on here. They've had a taste of the limelight, and now they've come to see their arrangement as a burden. But the thing about enjoying that fame, it's not theirs. They're only heroes because Clutch has made them heroes, and he can make them monsters just as easily. Long and short of it, they're trapped. But he says, hey, cheer up, you still get glory, you get fame, and you even get to be a bit violent here and there. And all they have to do is maintain appearances. They should instead be thanking him. But if they still don't get it, he puts it out very plainly. Be quiet and do your job and know your place. And speaking of the job, he assigns Surge with the task of taking out the Phantom Rider. As they leave the office, Surge, as you can imagine, is pretty pissed, and she's got to let off that rage somehow. And she does that by shooting off an electrical storm. We turn our attention to the caravan of cars that have been following along the shuttle as it makes its way across the world with each new event. Under one of the tour buses, we find Sonic with a cloak trying to fix his busted nano gear. This unfortunately leaves his face exposed, which is a problem because he has to get back into action as Surge's thunderstorm kicks off a bit of a problem between all those flying cars. Unfortunately, even though he's wearing a cloak this time, everybody in the cars immediately recognize the Phantom Rider. And while all that's happening, one of the lightning bolts hits a car and it begins to fall, but before Sonic can do anything about it, Storm arrives to save the day. The Babylon Rogues are here to help things out, guiding the cars away from the lightning storm and back towards the rest of the caravan. But while all that's happening, Jet recognizes the rider, who he obviously knows is Sonic. He goes to confront him, but Sonic, with all these people around, cannot risk his identity. So he attempts for a plan B. He takes off his cloak, throws it in Jet's face, and he, well, takes off. Unfortunately, he's got nowhere to go, which is a problem since he doesn't have his mask on anymore. But the RV he's next to opens its door and yanks him in. And it turns out he's rescued by Knight the Owl. Now, while we have seen Knight a few times here and there in IDW, this is the first time he's actually met Sonic the Hedgehog. He's then introduced to Dawn, who, if you don't remember, is, I don't know if they're dating or if they're married, but they're a couple. These two immediately believe Sonic when he says it wasn't him at the Misty Spire causing all the problems. And again, Sonic has got a lot of sway in this world. He's done a lot of good for folks. These two birds are only here to help him and also help keep him away from another certain bird on the hunt to find him. But once that worry clears, Knight produces a couple of mugs with a couple cute references on them and makes some cocoa. And the owl and the hedgehog have a discussion. When Sonic is asked about whether or not he's worried about the birds revealing his identity, the hedgehog kind of shrugs, saying it's a bit late for that. It would have been nice to keep flying under the radar, but it doesn't change anything to him. His friends are counting on him, so no matter what the world thinks, he'll do what he has to do. This is important because this really says a lot about Sonic and his character and why he's so cool. He was keeping a secret identity for the sake of his friends and for the sake of everything that was happening there. It just made things easier. But if that's compromised, it's whatever to him. He's always going to do what he thinks is the right thing to do. That's about as Sonic as it gets. Also, I gotta admit, I kind of want to try their cocoa. It sounds awesome. They add a little bit of cinnamon and chili to it. Has anyone ever tried that? Like a spicier cocoa? That sounds kind of awesome. But yeah, now that Sonic has said his piece, he asks what these two birds are up to, and Knight asks him if he's familiar with the Chaotic Detective Agency. As it turns out, Knight and Dawn help them out from time to time, and recently they've been investigating Clean Sweep Incorporated. They had spoken the night before everything kicked off, but they haven't heard back from them for a while. So it turns out Sonic, Knight, Dawn, and the Chaotix are all trying to accomplish the same thing. They think Clean Sweep is up to something, and they're trying to get to the bottom of it. With everybody on the same page, it turns out that Dawn had been working on fixing Sonic's nano gauntlet. He does his awesome little Sentai pose, gives it a slap, and he's off yet again. We turn our attention back to Surge and Kit, who have been sitting there through the entire night. And we have a heartbreaking little interaction here, with Kit grabbing a hold of Surge as she feels completely and utterly defeated. First it was Starline, and now it's Clutch. No matter what they do, someone's always controlling them. But Kit says it's going to be okay because he has an idea. For the first time in this issue, we turn our attention back to Tails, and Amy as they come across the mascots for Clean Sweep. Turns out they're guarding the door to Jewel's office. But as we quickly find out, they're not just any old mascots, they can actually put up a bit of a fight, and it's quickly revealed that the mascots are none other than Rough and Tumble. They call in for backup and then give chase to our heroes. And that, welcome back to Sonic Speed Readings. Issue 73 kicks off with yet another character yelling at Clutch. This time, Jewel confronts the opossum, saying that without her permission, Clutch has flooded the ship with his security detail and reactivated the shuttle arsenal all over one single troublemaker. That troublemaker being the Phantom Rider. While she is busy, she's not blind. Clutch says that he simply didn't want to bother her. All of this is simply a precautionary measure, with no real plans on using them. But Jewel is not satisfied, saying that she is revoking his administrative authority immediately. They can discuss more of it later, but she will handle things from here. But Clutch, not worried about it at all, reminds her that it's his security force on the ship, and they are going to listen only to him. So they will not be escorting him off the ship. They will not be escorting anybody anywhere without his permission. He still thinly veils some sense of innocence, saying it's all for the good of the sweepstakes, but obviously Jewel is well aware that he is a bit of a skis. She then goes to the two friends she can trust, that being Tangle and Whisper. They have to find a way to stop Clutch, and on top of that, they still have to deal with the Phantom Rider, but Tangle excitedly says that the Phantom Rider is Sonic, and now things are kind of falling into place. Clutch is clearly some sort of a bad guy here. Sonic is trying to figure out what he's up to. So now the plan is to get in contact with the Hedgehog so they can confirm that Clutch is the real baddie here, and hopefully the Hedgehog and all their friends can get this sorted out. But we now turn our attention to the final event of the Clean Sweepstakes, flying high over Central City. But before the event kicks off, Knight has some words to read from Clean Sweep's CEO, which reads, Clean Sweep Incorporated and the Restoration are aware that some of you have raised concerns over the repeated appearances of the Phantom Rider at our sweepstakes. We're taking this situation very seriously. Your security and enjoyment are our highest priority. We thank you for your continued patronage and solemnly pledge to bring this miscreant to justice. Obviously, trying their best to keep all the attention on to the Phantom Rider. And I love in the crowd, even though they're cheering, there's one person there holding up a little heart for the Phantom Rider. I'm going to assume that's a fan character of some kind. The different teams formulate some plans here. Tangle and Whisper are still debating on whether or not they should tell Duo and Lanolin about the real identity of the Phantom Rider. The Babylon Rogues are also discussing Sonic, planning to confront him to get some answers. But Kit and Surge, uncharacteristically, quietly, simply look on. And lastly, we turn our attention to Sonic, looking up at the main shuttle, saying, Tails, Amy, whatever you're up to, you better get it done soon. And now it's time to put on a show as the race kicks off. This one is a free fall drop straight towards Central City. So basically a giant game of chicken. These guys are crazy with their events. I love it. Sonic immediately causes quite the stir up, which sets Jet off. But before he can do anything, Surge boosts out from the rest of the pack to attack Sonic directly. She is not interested in any kind of sass or banter, none of that. She is here for a fight. Sonic dodges and she swivels around on her hover bike, which looks a lot like the iconic thing that Shadow did in Sonic 3, you know, where he's all airborne and then he turns his bike around and kicks off. You know what I'm talking about. She launches back towards Sonic, who dodges and then is confronted by the Diamond Cutters and the Babylon Rogues, with Lanolin saying she will hit him straight on with her Wispin if he doesn't come quietly. And Sonic, of course, says sorry, but he can't do that. The race has ground to a halt while everyone waits to see what the Phantom will do. Lanolin lets off an attack just as Surge launches hers, latching on to the Phantom Rider's extreme gear while narrowly missing being shot in the head by Whisper. While Surge holds him steady, Lanolin goes in for another hit, only to be stopped by Tangle, saying she has to stop, otherwise she'll hit Sonic. But before she can properly react to to that information, the rogues attack, only to be held off by Kit. And in response, Tangle grabs Surge with her tail, but unfortunately that wasn't a very smart move, as Surge grabs the tail and electrocutes the lemur. This of course ticks off Sonic, saying that Surge's fight is with him, and the two charge at each other again with a ridiculous reference to Sonic Adventure 2 and their odd localization choices, and it looks like Sonic gets a clean hit on the Tenric. But as he lands back on the extreme gear, looking at the falling Surge, even though she's damaged, she has a smirk on her face, revealing that she has damaged the gauntlet. And of course that means the nanosuit falls apart and Sonic is exposed to the rest of the world. Sonic asks what's her game, and Surge says no game, just following orders, with an insane declaration, happy now boss? She has technically destroyed the Phantom Rider just as he asked. And this of course ticks off Clutch. So while all of that chaos is happening outside, we still have Amy, Tails, and Belle running for their lives within the shuttle. But the two are distracted and sent the wrong way by Dawn, who has somehow made his way onto the shuttle. We quickly get through introductions, and now all parties of this story are all on the same page with information outside of Sonic and, who's behind everything. While none of the heroes have seen the Chaotix, who, if you don't recall, Dawn is looking for, Belle knows only of one place that would be appropriate to lock somebody up on the shuttle. So they make their way to the engine level. And after a cute little bit of interaction between these characters, they open a giant door and they come across the Chaotix in a cage. While they were indeed caught, they were at least productive, with Vector producing a USB drive packed full of the dirty dealings of Clean Sweep Incorporated. But as they bust the locks and make their way to freedom, they're confronted by Rough, Tumble, the security guards, and of course, Clutch himself. And that is where issue 73 ends. Issue 74 picks up right where the last one left off, with the Chaotix, Dawn, Tails, and Amy confronted by Clutch, his security detail, and Rough and Tumble. A fight quickly breaks out, but while all of that's happening, Tails takes Belle up to the panel to get the main security door open, but they're shot at by Clutch. Thankfully, it looks like everything is going the hero's way as they begin to wipe the floor with the opossum. Unfortunately, Clutch quickly takes Charmy as a hostage, demanding that the heroes make their way over to another cell and hand over the data drive. But as Vector feigns defeat, Espio throws a ninja star, getting Charmy loose, who then takes the drive to fly it away from the battle scene. Clutch and his security team quickly give chase, but orders Rough and Tumble to stay behind, declaring them to be dead weight. And as the door shuts, Clutch shoots the control panel, trapping everybody inside. On the control deck of the shuttle, we soon find out that the race has come to a halt and people are starting to panic. But all that is interrupted as Charmy makes his way with the data drive. He hands it off to Knight and Clutch orders them to stop. But Knight is quick to remind him that he's not an employee of the opossum. He plugs in the drive as the actual Restoration members hold the opossum steady. Jewel returns to the scene with the actual Restoration members and their Wispins, and another fight breaks out between Clean Sweep Security and the Restoration. That was a nice little reminder that the Restoration was once the poor man's freedom fighters, I mean the resistance, so they can actually put up a fight. And while all of that is happening, Charmy announces to the world that there has been some technical difficulties, but they are being sorted out. And Knight then lays out all of the terrible things that Clean Sweep has been up to, exposing Clutch and everything he's been behind this entire time, including poisoning soil, falsifying records, participating in extortion, violently silencing whistleblowers, just basic things you could pull out from the daily news. For real, we put up with a lot of insane crap. There's a lot of disgusting things happening in our world. Anyway, as Knight declares to the world who's behind all of this, the opossum shoves the owl aside, saying that the smear campaign can't stop him. And of course, we have that lovely trope of the villain accidentally announcing to the world everything he's been up to. The world now knows Clutch the opossum and the real deal behind Clean Sweep Incorporated. The crime lord only really works works when operating from the shadows, but he has nowhere left to slink to. He smashes a control panel and then tries to override the command of the shuttle, only to have that taken away from him and self-destruction initiated. Jewel, recovering from the fight, has overridden his administration access and set the shuttle to explode. In a rage, Clutch then forces the shuttle downwards towards Central City and then blasts away the controls, declaring that if he can't win, well, they know how it goes. Now, with a giant shuttle descending down towards the city, this grabs the attention of all the riders below them. The rogues don't know what's going on, but Surge immediately calls out what's happening. Clutch got called out, so he's taking the ship down with him, but she's not really pressed on it. And while all that's happening, Duo attempts to sneak off, but he's dragged back into the fold by Kit. Remember, Surge and Kit know exactly who Duo is, and they're not letting him slink off this time. This catches Lanolin off guard, asking where Duo was, and Surge, backing it up, asking, yeah, where were you? But Mimic, even under pressure, is a master manipulator, apologizing, saying that he found out something about Tangle and Whisper, and he wasn't sure if he could trust them. He says that they knew who the Phantom Rider was and wouldn't tell them. This, of course, turns Lanolin's attention back to Tangle and Whisper, furious that they protected a dangerous criminal, lied to her, even though they're supposed to be a team. Tangle says that she was just trying to protect Sonic, saying he probably had a good reason, but she's cut off by Lanolin saying that Sonic needs to face justice. Of course, Surge points out that in all of this, Sonic has left. Lanolin chases after him, with Tangle trying to say none of this makes sense. And Sonic himself could not care less about any of this drama, telling Lanolin they can do whatever they want to him later, but all that matters is right now, people are in danger, and that's where he is needed, so that is where he's going. So, with priorities in order, everybody races up towards the shuttle to attempt to save the day, including Duo, after given a choice by Surge, saying he can try his luck with the Diamond Cutters and Clutch up there, or down here with Surge and Kit. It is kind of awesome seeing Surge this relaxed and in control as everything is falling apart around her. They could have killed Duo right there, as Kit points out, but Surge reminds him that they're following his plan, and they need to keep their eyes on the prize, and Clutch is next. And that is where issue 74 ends. We pick back up in the engine room of the shuttle, now careening towards Central City. Our heroes are still desperately trying to get out. Tails and Belle are trying to override the system, keeping the door in place, and Amy is trying to smash through it with the Pico hammer. Now, she does make a little bit of progress, but unfortunately, once she breaches the metal, steam shoots out and scalds her. So even if they can bust through the door, that would come at a massive cost, and they certainly don't have the time to get through it, even if they could. Everybody's overheated and they are desperate. So that's the situation for the folks on the shuttle. But above it, we see Sonic racing to the scene, followed closely behind by the Diamond Cutters and followed up by the Babylon Rogues discussing the situation at hand. Now, thieves they may be, they're not evil. They do show concern for the folks of Central City, but instead of following along with the rest of the heroes, Jet has another idea and tells his team to follow him for a different plan, and we'll find out what that is later. The comic next shifts its attention over to the Diamond Cutters, and they very quickly sort out this particular plot thread. Mimic has been gallivanting around, pretending to be this character known as Duo for quite a long time, but all of that falls apart as he is called out by the name Mimic through a walkie-talkie he was keeping in his scarf. Is that kind of a sloppy way to just get this thing situated? Yeah, but we got a lot to get done in this comic book. So yes, Mimic is exposed, and Tangle and Whisper immediately give chase. So there's another set of heroes no longer focused on the shuttle. Lanolin just sits there stunned. She is experiencing what we call in the business a character arc, some growth, all that fun stuff. We'll get back to her too. We got a lot of characters to keep track of in this big chunky issue, and we now turn our attention to the big bad of the story, Clutch, as he has his security drag along the folks that he had captured on the main deck of the shuttle, which includes Knight, Charmy, Jewel, and a couple of nameless people we don't care about. He's about to hop in a pretty floating Cadillac and lead these guys to their fate. And I'm surprised the security detail is fine with all of this. Like, they're just dressed like bouncers at a concert, and they're just fine leaving these people here to die. Maybe they're part of Clutch's crew and they're just disguised like this and they're down for murder. It doesn't actually matter. What does matter is that Sonic arrives and disrespectfully drags Clutch across the ground, tossing him to finally face him. And I know some of you get sick of the Archie references, but I'm sorry. This immediately reminds me of Sonic doing this exact same thing to Silver in the Archie series. A very disrespectful move, and I am here for it. This is the first time Sonic and Clutch have met. Before Clutch can even finish the "you must be Sonic," that's when he gets slammed to the ground. Sonic does not have any time for any villain monologues or any kind of garbage. They have 20 minutes before self-destruction of the shuttle, even though it's already going to be crashing to the city below. It's a whole mess. A fight breaks out between the two, which is mostly just Sonic dodging the cane shots from Clutch. Clutch compliments the speed of the Hedgehog, but says that nobody's faster than his trigger finger, which, I mean, he's let off a lot of shots and not one of them's hit. Regardless, we are not done with the interruptions as Surge and Kit arrive on the scene, landing with an electrical blast, and once again proclaiming that they quit. Clutch is furious and says he will not be beaten by a pack of insolent children, and I think this is the first time they mention, and they mention this a lot in this issue, that Clutch is an elderly character. I mean, he moves well for his age, whatever that age may be, but as we will see with other characters, the opossum is older than I guess I initially thought he was. Anyway, Sonic frees the two bugs, they catch him up to speed, the security detail finally shows some semblance of sense and decides to sit out whatever this crazy superpowered fight is. So yes, the opossum is all kinds of screwed right now. Meanwhile, we get back to the engine room, and one quick stupid little conversation changes everything. Espio simply asks what happened with Rough and Tumble. During one of the side stories where these two clashed with Cream and her mother, they promised Vanilla they would turn over a new leaf, and I love that off-page intimidation that Vanilla provides in this series, by the way. Anyway, these two explain that they did turn a new leaf. They just took a job to wear these silly mascot costumes, and Mr. Clutch just kept asking them to do more and more. Dawn points out they could have just quit. Apparently they didn't know they could do that, so they decide they quit and then decide to help the heroes get out of the engine room. They head on up to the door and they get it loose. This is interesting for a couple of reasons. We have a couple of powerhouse characters in their midst. We have Amy Rose and her hammer, and we have Vector the crocodile, both fairly strong characters, and neither of them could get through the door, but this duo right here managed to do it. So that is an interesting feat that a lot of folks might overlook. These are pretty powerful characters. Now keep in mind, they don't get the door completely open without extra help, and it is burning everybody's hands, but they're the ones to really start making a difference. And yeah, that's all I really have to say about this scene. Let's get back to Sonic. He tells the two bugs to go get everybody else loose while he rescues Surge and Kit from the artillery now let loose by Clutch. So all kinds of chaos is happening here. Sonic is trying to help Surge and Kit, telling them they should team up against Clutch. Surge wants nothing to do with it, trying to punch the dude mid-air, and unfortunately that distraction costs them as an explosion sets off next to them, sending all three flying from the egg stream gear. And I've been questioning the weird shape of this thing the whole time. Been questioning Eggman's motives because it's Eggman. I was waiting for the other shoe to drop, and folks, it finally happens here as the screen pops loose on the extreme gear, and then arms and legs shoot out of it, and Eggman's face appears on screen. This, folks, is technically a metal Eggman. That's right, Sonic has been writing a robo copy this entire time. You know how I feel about my robot doubles? We're gonna have a great time back in March Madness. Oh my god. Oh, considering other things, oh my god. Oh my god. Anyway, I will freak out a little bit more about Robo Eggy in a bit, but the good doctor has finally revealed himself at the tail end of this journey, and we now have a villain on villain battle as Robo Eggman takes on Clutch, and he also calls the opossum old. Eggman's not exactly a spring chicken, so that really should tell you just how old this green little gremlin actually is. So there's all kinds of craziness happening in this fight. Sonic is trying to battle the opossum while trying to save his life at the same time as Eggman really just wants to kill this thing. Clutch, meanwhile, keeps slapping that remote of his, sending the artillery wild. And while all of that is happening, Surge has been powering up. And I've never noticed this before, but she kind of has something akin to Shadow's inhibitor rings. Her bracelets have these lightning rod protrusions pop on out while she lets out an attack she calls Overcharge while she's throwing up the horns. I love this girl. She could have teamed up with Sonic, but instead she's gonna do her own thing and takes out all 3 enemies at once. But unfortunately, this takes it out of Surge. She's given it everything she's got. She's pushed herself too hard. She's got nothing left to give. And even though it seems like she took out everybody else, unfortunately, the Extreme Gear was built a little more sturdy than most of Eggman's other robots. And it quickly recovers from the attack, with Eggman saying, "You think I can't build a Surge Protector?" Which is funny, play on words, the name and everything. But yeah, the robot gets up and takes off with Clutch. Now, this is interesting for a couple of reasons. First off, I don't know how I feel about Eggman always showing up and just wrecking any other villain that shows up in this series. On one hand, it shows like why he is the big bad of the entire franchise, but at the same time, it would be kind of nice to see if anybody else could really stand a chance against the good doctor. But Clutch is an interesting case, and I will talk about him later. For now, Eggman and Clutch are out of the picture. And as Sonic recovers, Surge talks a little smack, saying she let him off easy, but don't go thinking they're friends, and also tells him he better survive this so they can have a fight fair and square. We turn our attention back to the other heroes who, now having escaped the engine room, are back in the control center. Unfortunately, no matter how good Tails and Bell are, getting through the tech and the software doesn't mean squat if the shuttle itself is way too damaged, and yes, it's way too damaged. So that particular option to get it back on course is off the table. But at the very least, the 2 different sets of heroes are reunited. So we got Chaotix all together again, except for Mighty. It's always Mighty. I'll never say they're complete until we get Mighty back. Dawn and Night are reunited, and they're adorable. And on top of that, we finally see what the Babylon Rogues have been up to. Just like they helped guide the cars in the caravan a couple issues ago, they now guide those same flying cars with towing cables to get the shuttle turned a different way from Central City. The Babylon Rogues and the many fans who've been following along with Clean Sweep are the ones to save the city, and I think that's incredibly cool since they always leave Sonic to do all the heavy lifting. This time, everybody else literally is doing that. And speaking of Sonic, he slaps into the side of the windshield like a bug. This startles Bell and Tails, and Amy, not missing a beat, shoves everyone out of the way, screaming, "I'm coming, Sonic!" and smashes the window with a hammer, jumping into the arms of her favorite blue hedgehog. Once again, for anybody who's missed Amy being, well, a little more Amy, it's very clear her affection for Sonic has not diminished whatsoever. This was an incredibly cute moment in a dire situation. The heroes are now all reunited. The rogues continue to guide the cars and in turn the shuttle away from the city, and everything looks like it's going to plan, but unfortunately, even with all this effort, it's not enough. They can steer the shuttle different directions, but no matter what they do, this thing is going down, and the self-destruct is still active. There is nothing they can do about those 2 facts. Even Tails is stumped on what to do. There is no safe place to put this thing. That is until Jewel comes up with a solution. She points towards the Emeraldville ruins, an abandoned town that was wrecked in the war with Eggman that was repurposed to be Restoration HQ. And they give this heartbreaking shot of the little makeshift garden and garden shack that not only serves as the underground entrance for the restoration, but this is also Silver's garden. So Sonic tells the Babylon Rogues to guide everybody towards Restoration HQ. And while this does suck, it does get worse, as Amy asks, "Is Restoration HQ empty?" And Jewel responds with tears in her eyes, "It's better than the city." So yes, while all the civilian life will be saved in Central City, if things go as currently planned, there will still be heavy casualties. Whoever is in Restoration HQ right now will die. But Sonic is Sonic, and as he points out, the ship has not crashed or exploded yet. and he turns to Jet and issues him a challenge. See who between the two of them can rescue the most people. And with renewed motivation, the Chaotix, Sonic, Amy, Tails, Belle, and even Jet all make their way towards Restoration HQ. Meanwhile, we turn our attention back to Tangle, Whisper, and Mimic, and I'll be real, when I first read this, I completely forgot this was another plot we had to follow, as we see the trio battling among the many traps that were initially built for that final event of Clean Sweepstakes. And while this does look cool, and God, I wish this scene and a lot of these other action scenes were animated, Mimic quickly gets away, getting lost in the crowd. And unfortunately, the two heroes don't have any time to hunt him down, as the course and all the traps just floating midair are now falling apart. Thankfully, Lanolin finally proves a little useful, and she announces over her sound-based whispin that she is with the Diamond Cutters and her team can help guide them to safety. She then turns her attention to Tangle and Whisper and apologizes for all the mistakes she's made. But Tangle tells her to save it. They're on the same team and they're here to help people, with Whisper jumping in saying that she also has made mistakes. Tangle is still ticked, but that's a conversation for later. I'll be real, I know a lot of fans don't like Lanolin because of how she treated Silver, all these very silly details, and yeah, I do think her priorities were a little out of whack in issue 74, chasing down Sonic, but I don't know. I don't think she really has a lot to apologize for. She's just doing her best with the information she had available to her. Regardless, that's just me, and this scene is here to tell you that Lanolin, while a lot of you guys considered her to be a jerk through these many issues, has gone on an emotional journey, and she is growing, and she'll be a better leader and all that crap. And if I sound dismissive, I'm very sorry. I should state I love this character. I like all the Diamond Cutters. But yes, there you go. All of that's finally wrapped up, and we turn our attention back to Restoration HQ as Sonic arrives on the scene. We have an adorable little rivalry between the green bird and the blue hedgehog as the two race to save people. While that happens, Tails and Belle head to the machine shop. Since it's so far away from everything else in the HQ, it's likely they didn't hear the announcement in the main hall. So they're gonna go down and warn everyone to leave. They get the job done fast, but there is still one more person to get out of here. And that is Belle's little Motobug, as she lovingly calls it, Motobud. The amazingly still unnamed orangutan points out that she has been struggling for weeks to get Motobud back up and running. His circuitry is exposed and he can't risk being moved yet. She loves this dude so much she intends to fix him before the shuttle crashes down. But she won't do it alone, as Tails and hippie orangutan, still unnamed, but we'll call him Not Rotor, both agree to help fix this guy. But they don't have a lot of time, as Sonic and Jet finish saving everybody else, including a little cameo character from Evan's fan comic. Silver's sister is now canon. If I can't get the Freedom Fighters, I will happily take cameos from Ghosts of the Future. Sega, don't take the wrong lesson there. Please don't come down on fun little cameos like this. Still pissed as hell with you guys cracking down on the Bumblecast as hard as you are. Conversation for a different time. Where was I? Oh yeah, the shuttle crashes into Restoration HQ and blows the whole thing up. Whoops. Now it looks like Sonic and Jet got everybody out, but Sonic is gonna head back in just to be sure, and this is where we see the line in the sand between these two rivals. Jet has done enough. He's not risking his neck in a fiery inferno. Sonic just shrugs it off, saying, "Suit yourself," and heads back in. And when he does, he comes across his best buddy, Tails, who was still here and did survive, along with Belle, and once again, the orangutan that's not named, but is doing, I think, a Spider-Man reference here. Even if not, he looks like a baller holding up rubble, trying to keep Belle safe. Thankfully, Sonic and Tails are ready to rescue. Sonic tells Belle to use her iconic little kick to smack the big beam that they're holding in place so he can get in and grab everybody. He does, and they race off to the exit, but unfortunately, some rubble falls, and it's looking bad for Sonic until the Motobud comes to life. And not only that, it has some extra upgrades thanks to some extreme gear, and now it can fly, as they say in this comic, like a real bug. So yes, all the heroes survive, and they return with Amy once again overjoyed and embracing her blue hedgehog. As Belle looks over the rubble that was Restoration HQ, breaking down and crying, Jet approaches Sonic. And I think this is the least annoying this character has ever been. He's willing to concede a tie for their competition on one simple condition. Sonic owes him a rematch without any distractions, no conditions, just the two of them in a race. So Sonic can see what Jet can really do. And Sonic, of course, agrees. And Jet, along with the rest of the rogues, take off. The Diamond Cutters, having finishing their work with the race crowd, arrive on the scene, with Tangle approaching her lifelong friend as Jules says that she has failed. The restoration is done. Tangle picks her up with her long tail and shows her the reality of the situation. The restoration was never a building. It has always been the people. The people who immediately set to work on helping each other, including a Daniel Barnes with a Sega Saturn logo helping out Gigi in their amazing pants. I don't know if there's any other IDW crew cameos in this, but I know those two pointed it out on social media and I thought it was adorable. So yes, Restoration HQ is done and dusted, but overall the heroes are victorious and they all pitch in together to help clean up the mess. But that's not where the story ends, not quite yet. We have one more scene as Sonic and Tails arrive at Tails' house. Yes, the same one from Sonic Battle, just the fox's giant head. I love it. But as they approach the front door, they notice it's ajar. They go inside and Sonic points out that everything looks normal, everything's in place. And I love the little detail of showing Sonic's shoes being set aside. Since he is wearing his rider gear, he did store them here. I also hate again that they once again reconfirm that the socks are a part of the shoes, and no, I will never call them anything but socks because thinking they're anything else is insane. These are not Santa boots. Argue all you want with me in the comments, I don't care. Sega's not always right. Sometimes they do stupid things. They often do stupid things. This is one of the stupidest. Speaking of shoes, you have Sonic 3 out in the theaters, but we can't get some proper Shadow shoes for sale? You got Reebok doing this stupid garbage here? Where are the shoes? Just let us buy the damn shoes. Why is this such a challenge every movie? I still don't have my Knuckles Tims. What is happening? Anyway, yeah, I'm sorry. Back to the scene. Everything is in place except for one important thing. One very important thing. The lab's generator core. And that generator core was a Chaos Emerald. And we end this story at the location of that emerald as it sits on an altar in a room that would make H.R. Geiger proud. And that is where the story ends, on a lovely, lovely cliffhanger. Now, when this comic first came out, I had just finished up and published my last video on the IDW run overall, and while I have always enjoyed these books, and I certainly understand the limitations they have and how things can be perceived if you are solely focused on one thing for way too long, like I have been for Sonic stuff, I was feeling ultimately a little bit burned out. I know everybody is sick and tired of me comparing Archie and Fleetwade to what IDW is doing right now, and as you have heard in even recent coverage, I still will make some jabs here and there. It gets exhausting hearing old heads like me keep comparing the good old days to what's happening right now, especially if you're enjoying what is provided, because what is provided ultimately is very well put together, even with slower chapters. But that being said, do I feel that they have turned things around in terms of the pacing for IDW stories? Overall, I do think this particular run of chapters, and in turn this overall Sonic Riders arc, was a lot of fun. Far from perfect in my eyes, but now that we have the full story and we can go back and enjoy it on its own terms and don't have to wait month to month for every little thing to come out, I do think that yes, this is one of the stronger arcs that IDW Sonic has provided to us, and regardless of anything else, I do think it's pretty awesome they got to the 75th issue milestone, and I am thankful that they do carry on the tradition from Archie that is making a big stinking deal out of every 25th issue they hit, because that is a big deal. And regardless of whatever you think about IDW versus Archie versus anything else, this comic is still carrying the legacy of everything that's come before it, and I'm so thankful that Sonic is still so incredibly important in the comic medium, because he has been ever since the early 90s, and I hope that does not change. I always always want this to be a priority. And this comic showed a lot of love to the Sonic Riders era, on top of giving a lot of interesting characters a chance to shine, giving us a focus on a completely different bad guy from Eggman, and even giving Sonic a chance to interact with the rest of the cast and the world at large in a completely different way. The idea of the Phantom Rider was a lot of fun. I had fun with the reveal that it was Sonic himself, not some new rival, and I loved seeing all of this from the perspective of Sonic. And that works doubly well because this is obviously a reference to Kamen Rider, and I slapped my head when I got to the end of issue 69 because it was obvious that they took the idea of Kamen Rider and decided to say, what if we had a literal Sonic Rider? And that's exactly what they did. And I think that type of story works incredibly well in the format of Sonic Riders, and that combined works well with shonen-styled storytelling, similar to tournament arcs, Sentai stories, all those fun things that a lot of the fans of the early 2000s era of Sonic the Hedgehog, so you folks that grew up with Sonic Riders, Sonic X, the adventure games, I'd imagine a lot of this resonated with you. The overall vibe was a lot of fun, and I think it's clear that the folks working on this particular arc grew up loving those particular elements of the franchise. And in that sense, I think it worked very well. It was also nice to see them neatly wrap up a lot of plot elements that they have been playing around with for quite a long time. It's great to see Moto Bud back in action with some fun little upgrades. I think a lot of us obviously knew that there was going to be a turn for Lanolin after everyone's been so frustrated with her. I think it's obvious they were going to give her room to grow, and while I have compared her to Sally in the past, and I will be elaborating on that point in a future video, if you don't like that, don't watch it. I have said before, and I will say again, Lanolin is clearly her own person with a very distinct personality, and it was fun watching that continue to be explored and allowing her a chance to grow, because she clearly will after all of this manipulation from Mimic. I will once again say that I do think Tango was a little off base being mad at Lanolin. I know it was frustrating seeing her side with Duo and all that early on, but we as the readers have always known that Duo was Mimic. Lanolin didn't. Mimic is the one who has been manipulating everybody here. Lanolin doesn't need to apologize to anybody, in my opinion. Certainly doesn't need to be scolded by Tangle, of all people. I think she did fine with the information she had available to her, and she was also burned by her team. Tangle and Whisper didn't trust her. Granted, they had pretty decent reason not to. She was physically attacked by the Phantom Rider, and I'm sorry, but Whisper has proven to be completely emotionally unstable. Like multiple times. I could rant on and on and on, but I am going to come to Lanolin's defense, because not a lot of readers, at least the ones babbling on social media, give her a chance because of their precious silver, or they love their quiet wolf, or whatever. But I'm gonna give it up to the lamb here. I think she's a great character. Anyway, that's enough about the Diamond Cutters. Clutch is... I'm conflicted on Clutch. I love his design, I love his motivation, I love the role he plays. I don't know if I'm a big fan of his plans, and his overall personality leaves me a little wanting. I can see they're trying to give him a little more nuance here instead of just a straight up sinister, vile critter. We see him apologize to Mimic at one point. He tries to keep his temper under control, and unfortunately, the more screen time with a character like this will just make them less scary overall. I do like the character, and I do like this setting, and I do like the stakes at play, even in the finale there, but when you sit there and start to unpack it a little bit, I don't know what he was trying to do. They do explain things here and there throughout this arc, but it's so incredibly vague that it doesn't immediately pop to mind. And if he wants to keep out of the spotlight, he's doing a pretty miserable job of it, skirting very close with some very close friends of Sonic the Hedgehog and Amy Rose and all these characters he doesn't want anything to do with. But it's because he went out of his way to mess with their extreme gear, like not even to kill them, just to get them out of the race. That was his plan to get the heroes off his scent, by sabotaging their stuff. Like, of course they're going to investigate that. Obviously they're going to investigate that. He kicked off his own downfall. And yes, while I understand that he should be weaker once he is exposed, he works best in the shadows, I was a little deflated when I saw that he didn't really have a plan B at all. I just thought he'd be a little bit more plotting than what he was through this whole story. I do think this and some other other elements could have used a little bit more time to cook. Like if I had a better idea of like a bigger plan, like if this event was going to be utilized to do something incredibly dastardly, then maybe I would feel this character was utilized a bit better. But as it stands, he's just kind of there until he gets his ass kicked in at the end of the story. I mean, seriously, Sonic didn't even know this dude existed until that last fight, and then the possum is dragged off by the actual villain of the series. I don't know, maybe I was expecting this guy to actually pull off whatever plot he had going for him. And I guess in a way, he still kind of got what he wanted. Restoration HQ was demolished, but I don't know. I felt a lot of his plans and a lot of the things they were dropping through these months didn't lead to much of anything in terms of Clutch's motivation overall. That being said, I'm not upset with the setup for this story and having a lot of these stories tied up, because my biggest issue with this arc overall is I really like some of these ideas and I really wanted to see these explored a little bit further, and maybe they will be in coming months. I'm thinking specifically of the Phantom Rider stuff. They had a really cool concept, a fun new way to utilize Sonic, and I don't think it got as much love as it could have. Sonic shows up as the Phantom Rider in one issue, and then he's exposed to most of the tertiary cast in the following issue. And in that same issue, everybody who knew who Sonic was immediately figured out why he's doing what he's doing. And that is something else I am also conflicted on, at least a little bit. I felt there could have been a bit more drama between Sonic and the other characters. There could have been some really fun fights, things of that nature. Maybe this changes how the world sees Sonic the Hedgehog. There's potential for some really crazy shifts in this world, something that we could really explore for a while. But with that said, I do also kind of appreciate common sense. See, a lot of stories like this, having your identity exposed, is a common thing with comic books. Surprise, surprise. While I have seen some stories like this utilized to really explore betrayal and conflicted feelings between a hero and people close to them, I have also seen characters act out of character for the sake of drama. That does not happen here. Everybody who learns that the Phantom Rider is Sonic also knows Sonic. He's very clear on his moral standing, his attitude, and why he does the things he does. No, he's not going to explain himself to everybody. He's just going to keep doing what he thinks is right. And I'm very thankful that they take the time to explain that in this arc. And again, I think this is kind of a callback to the characterization we've seen of the character back in Sonic X. I joked about it before, but there is an episode where it looks like Sonic has turned on the world when he's just not going along with whatever garbage Eggman is trying to shill. He doesn't try to debate him. He doesn't try to give him a second chance. None of that. He sees a problem and he goes to solve it, even if everybody else on Earth thinks he's doing the wrong thing. He doesn't care. And I do like that there's a balance here between what we've seen in the early 2000s version of Sonic versus one that has been explained to have matured at least a little bit in that time since. I think a lot of elements here are showing a return to form for characterization, something we have seen quite a bit with Shadow, and I think we're seeing a bit of that with Amy, and I think we are seeing that here with Sonic as well. I am getting on a bit of a tangent here, I do apologize, but my original point was, yes, common sense. Sonic is very clear on who he is, and therefore his friends and his rivals kind of know what to expect from the guy. So they quickly deduce that yes, if Sonic is doing this, then that means that whoever's running this thing is probably the bad guy. And the extra mile here is Whisper going out of her way to review footage and see the little details that differentiate between Sonic and Mimic's version of the Phantom Rider. Normally, when they do clone characters in stuff like this, there are some little details here and there so the reader or the viewer can differentiate between the two characters to indicate that one is a fake, but rarely do the characters in universe ever actually point out those different details themselves. This does frustrate me a little bit because I feel like Whisper could have been a little bit more thorough in terms of Duo and that whole situation with Mimic. Like, yeah, she immediately figured that Duo was a bad guy, but dropped it, and maybe this Phantom Rider stuff is her redeeming herself on that front. Whatever the case, I've never seen an in-universe character really point out specific details being different. It's usually just actions, and they do both here. That's what I mean when I say common sense. It feels like Evan has just seen these tropes way too many times in other media and just said, no, our characters are smarter than that. Does it cut out a lot of fun drama that could be taking place? Yes. Do I wish they could have expanded some of these stories a bit more? Absolutely. But the initial ideas were a lot of fun to begin with, and I do appreciate that these characters aren't complete idiots. And even then, the likes of Tangle and Whisper not telling Lanolin does give us a little bit of drama, and it's obvious that even if the main villain knows who the Phantom Rider is, he is still trying to keep that under wraps because the world sees Sonic as a hero, so they might all come to the same conclusion. If Sonic is trying to disrupt the event, then maybe they will all turn their attention to Clean Sweep themselves. And that leads me to Surge and Kid. I'm not going to get too deep into their characterization here because I do want to do a deep dive on the two of them specifically very soon. I'm very, very interested in their characterizations, and this was a fun turn for them, being portrayed as heroes. I think this was a lot of fun, and I know a lot of fans were really hoping to see them actually turn to the side of light instead of just pretending to be good guys to infiltrate the Restoration. That is a fairly obvious route for these characters to take, but I still have a sneaking suspicion that the writers are going to break a lot of readers' hearts with these two. We're going to wait to see how their story continues to play a little bit longer before I get into a deep analysis. But as I said before, in my previous coverage of Surge, there is a lot more going on under the surface, and these two are used to explore some very complicated topics and very big, complicated feelings. As for other tertiary characters, nice to see the Chaotix. Don't really have much to say about them. Same with Rough and Tumble. Made me smile. Always happy to see them. Not a whole lot to say about them here. I did like the twist that they were the mascots the entire time. Oh god, the Babylon Rogues, almost forgot about them. Not super important to this story, but at the same time they are. If you're gonna do Sonic Riders, they need to be a part of it. They aren't the central focus, but they certainly added a lot to the story as far as I'm concerned. And seeing the dynamic between Jet and Sonic in this last issue was a lot of fun, especially after the emotional roller coaster Jet was going on with his jealousy of Surge getting all the attention in that first race. And I love seeing him sit on that winner pedestal like it's a throne, like he belongs there and he's used to it and almost tired of it. And then seeing his frustration with the Phantom Rider, and then even knowing that it's Sonic, still wants to battle the guy. But when push comes to shove and the shuttle is about to crash on Central City, him and his team get to work saving people, putting all that aside and instead telling Sonic he wants a proper race. That was a lot of respect those two characters have shown each other. It was really cool. Jet is a very overlooked rival in this franchise, but these birds brought a whole new style to the franchise, one that a lot of fans have dearly missed, and we see a lot of that vibe in this story. I think overall, this worked almost on the same level as the Metal Virus worked as a Sonic-themed zombie story. This worked as a Sonic-themed race or sports shonen manga, whatever. I know some of you guys get mad if I emphasize the vowel incorrectly. It's weird. It felt like it went on almost a little bit too long, but also not long enough in a lot of other aspects. Really like the idea of the Phantom Rider. I like seeing Sonic struggle to utilize it, and I even liked how Eggman was implemented into this story. His interaction with the heroes at the start was hilarious, and while he did have his own motivation, as you would expect, he didn't betray Sonic. The Hedgehog might feel that way because Eggman wanted to get his hands on Clutch himself, but he didn't attempt to attack Sonic at all in any of this. Maybe a little bit in that fight. I mean, he did pat Sonic on the head there for a second, but it does again show a lot of respect the Doctor has for the Hedgehog. Yeah, he wants to take him out, but he wants to be the one to do it. The story of Sonic Riders and a story themed around the vibe of Sonic Riders should focus a lot on rivalry, and each one of the rivals we saw here in this story to Sonic show him a lot of respect in a lot of different ways. Whether that's to immediately trust him even though it looks like he's doing something fishy in terms of the Phantom Rider stuff, or Eggman understanding how useful Sonic is and willing to team up with him to take down a greater threat, and even willing to keep his end of the bargain in terms of, well, not hurting the Hedgehog at the very least. Like that nanosuit could have done so many nasty things to Sonic, but it never did. And even Surge, while she openly attacked Sonic a lot in this comic, she still showed a lot of respect to the Hedgehog at the end of the journey, telling him to survive so they can finish their fight fair and square. Jet, Surge, and Eggman all have something to prove to themselves and to Sonic, and whether they want to admit it or not, that is showing a lot of respect to the hero of this story. And let's be real, I think a lot of our favorite relationships in this world all revolve around the rivalries. Regardless of who you ship with who, and maybe you want to watch a bird and a hedgehog kiss, I don't know. The rivalry, the competitive nature of it all is what works for me when it comes to the relationships of Sonic the Hedgehog. I said it in other videos, and I'm going to keep emphasizing this because a lot of you guys get mad at me when I talk about the console war Wars, Sonic versus Mario, all of that. Competition is built into the bones of this franchise, and when Sonic is trying to pick a fight, that's when Sonic's at his best. And I think Riders works as well as it does because not only was it an ambitious game, but it had an ambitious art style and a vibe, and the energy between all of the characters is what motivated you as a player of that game, and it's a motivator for the readers of this book. So I hope they continue to play with that a bit more. As for the future of the franchise, yeah, I do think despite the imperfections I feel exist in this arc, they did a really bang up job, and I am excited for what's next. That's hard for me to do when it comes to IDW because you can just feel the limitations Sega puts on the creators. They can't shift the status quo too much. So it was nice to see the Yellow Chaos Emerald at the end of this story in a place I'm completely unfamiliar with. My initial thought was this had something to do with the black arms. They had black organic material making up the room, and the closest aesthetic I can draw to that is the black arms, but it's not exactly one for one with what we've seen for the alien race. I mean, it would kind of make a little bit of sense considering all the promotion they've done for Shadow recently. And on top of that, we do know that there is a Shadow one-shot story that revolves around a mysterious village, and we can see on the cover that Shadow is holding the Yellow Chaos Emerald, the emerald he's largely associated with these days. So it looks like whatever story is being hinted at here will be followed up with Shadow himself. So maybe it is the black arms, maybe it's something else entirely, but one way or the other, Shadow will be involved. This is one of my favorite arcs from the IDW run. I smiled like an idiot when I saw the return of Motobud. I was very satisfied to see Lanolin turn a corner. The set pieces here were really cool, and again, I really like the Phantom Rider. That transformation pose that Sonic takes, I need that in a statue form. That was so cool. The artist had so much fun putting this stuff together, and I'm sorry if I screwed up any artist names. I know they worked a little bit interchangeably between issues and issue 75. I do different artists, but yeah, it's the same crew I have praised time and time again. I love the writers, I love the artists, the colorists, letterists. All of these guys work together to put together some really fun stuff, and the Sonic Rider arc was a lot of fun. And I'm sorry, but it's my point of reference. I am getting more Archie vibes looking at the teaser for the following issue, where we see the Resistance logo falling apart and dusty while all of our characters look on into the horizon. Very reminiscent to Brave New World after they wrapped everything up with Robotropolis and Robotnik himself in early Archie. And I really do hope we get some fun shakeups going forward, because 75 did mark the end of an era with Restoration HQ. I've been wanting them to shake things up for a while personally, and while they did do a decent job building this space up, I wasn't too super attached to it, and I feel like a lot of fans, myself included, were getting a little bit tired of all the motifs that were built on from the days when Sonic Forces was the latest game out for the series. I think a lot of us are still waiting for a time skip or something that shows what happens after Sonic Frontiers. Maybe Sega isn't allowing them to do anything with that. Maybe they have to stay here because whatever's next for Sonic Team takes place immediately after Sonic Frontiers. I don't know. I just know a lot of fans are waiting for Sage to appear in the book, and I am too. And I hope we get to explore more of the world. They can flesh it out a little bit more and do some really fun things. Not to be too nostalgia heavy, but something I did like from Fleetway and from Archie, mostly from Fleetway though, to be fair, is exploring the zones that were in the classic games. They have these unique designs, and in turn, they should have some unique culture in them worth exploring. My buddy Channel Pup has mentioned this a few times. If we're going to be bringing Green Hill back over and over again, then establish it as a home base, give it some world building. I would love to know what the totem poles are all about. Was that an ancient culture? Is that a current culture? I don't know. But be it the classic games or the modern games, anything like that, I think all these different game worlds should be more than just references for this book. I liked the idea back then that the comics were used to expand and explore a lot of elements from the games. I think they can do that here in IDW, and I hope they do. Some of my favorite downtime books were the ones dealing with Angel Island, for instance, and I would like to see a little bit more than just the same generic cities that we have seen time and time and time again in IDW Sonic. Heck, give us some futuristic stuff. We had a bunch of flying cars since they were in Sonic Riders. What's going on there? How's the technology differentiate between cities? Are there different cultures? Whatever. I'm rambling a bit here, and I apologize. Just saying, there's still a lot of potential even within the confines of staying in the game canon. And I think the Riders arc proved that to a lot of different degrees. This was a lot of fun. This explored some fun tropes, some fun anime and manga tropes, and I think they're starting to finally find the balance between longer form storytelling with some of these arcs versus that shorter month-to-month story storytelling that they sometimes do. But yeah, my tune has changed ever so slightly since I whined about everything back in issue 69. Nice. They paid off a lot of fun ongoing stories. They gave us some really thrilling settings and some fun ideas that hopefully can be explored a little bit further down the line, and did give us a massive shakeup in terms of locale. So I hope we see that expanded on as well. But yeah, folks, that's going to do it for today. Thank you for joining me as we wrapped up this comic book. I thought 75 was a lot of fun. There's a lot of little things I want to pick apart. I'm excited to see where the Yellow Emerald goes. You'd better believe we'll be talking again about that Eggman robot in March. And yeah, I am once again excited to see what comes next in this series.